The biggest mistake you could make is to allow people to convince you that power is a dirty word. If you want to become a strong and capable person worthy of respect, you should pursue it aggressively. But before you do, you need to develop an understanding of what true power actually is. Is it the ability to get laid and get rich, or is it something far more profound? Find out right now as my guest Tai Lopez and I map out the true nature of power, wealth, and seduction. As somebody who has seen the good and the bad of money and power up close, what is it exactly that you think people get wrong, and why does it matter so much to learn and get it right?
Let's take them one at a time. Wealth, yeah, I've been poor and I've been rich and I've been in between. Wealthy's better, probably, but more money, more problems too. I always tell people, think about life as like a curve, and you call it the kind of efficient frontier. When I had no money, I was sleeping on a couch in a mobile home. I remember seeing $47 in my account and I had very little happiness. Then I built my first funnel, and I was one of the first people to use Google AdWords. It was 2 months old. And I went, within 9 months, I was making basically $8,000 a month on autopilot.
Wow.
My happiness went really high. Then I remember when you really start to make money, make $1 million a week or whatever it is. I lived in Beverly Hills. The first month I was there, it was a big house, 17,000 square feet. So you needed a fleet of maids. And I used an agency. A maid came, worked one day. A month later, get a lawsuit. She said she slipped on a banana peel, wanted money. Wealth, that's the banana peel effect of wealth in the US. All of a sudden you become a target. So what happened on that curve, my happiness went up. All of a sudden I started, you can make too much money. Then all of a sudden your happiness plateaus. Then you're like Mark Zuckerberg, who last year spent $32 million on private security.
Jesus. That
That means you have credible threats against your children, kidnapping. You're spending $2.5 million a month on security. His happiness has now gone over the cliff, and you can actually be so wealthy, you're back to where you were when you were poor. Rockefeller, there's a book called Titan. He's the richest man in modern times, 600 billion net worth. In the book, you can read, in about the 1890s, he reached the pinnacle of his success, but he was attacked by the US government. There was a news reporter, this woman, that was the thorn in his flesh, always saying he was a scam and blah, blah, blah. And he lost all his hair in his 50s from stress. All of his hair, his eyebrows, eyelashes, hair. And he had a moment of clarity where he said, all of the money I have made has not compensated me for the stress I've gone through. Meaning, it's too much. So that's my answer on wealth. Find the point, which for most people is going to be, 6 figures of profit, maybe 7 figures. When you start going to make 8 figures, the banana peel effect, your best friend's going to try to steal your money. The tax guys come and show up and go, well, was that a real business expense? So try to find the optimal point on the efficient frontier. Now you asked about power. My main mentor in the last 10 years has been Dr. David Buss. He's maybe the most respected living evolutionary psychologist. And I have a female. I like to always have one male mentor and one female. And Dr. Helen Fisher, who's also one of the preeminent scientists. I came to them one day and I said, you know what? There's 4 M's of motivation for everybody. And I said, what do you think of my theory, Dr. Buss? He said, I think it's a decent theory. He always has his own improvements. But the first M is material things. The second M is mating. The third M is movement/freedom. The fourth M is mastery/status. What we get wrong about ourselves and others when it comes to power or wealth is not understanding that almost every wealthy person that I quiz into their unconscious mind, X-ray into the mind, they're not really driven by material things. There's a lot of people who seek money because they like the fourth M, mastery, status, or power. So when it comes to men are much more driven by power. I'm already seeing the results. The first time I launched this quiz, 6,000 people took it the first day in about 190 countries. So I'm getting good data, and I'm finding a pattern. I ask at the end, is your sex male or female? I don't get into genders. Sex, okay? I notice a consistent trend. Men care about mastery, status, power. Women do occasionally, but rarely. And that makes sense. Our ancestors, the men, Nietzsche, maybe the second smartest person I've ever read, Nietzsche said, the will to power. This is the force that drives Earth. Donald Trump, Joe Biden, they are there because they had the will to power. They were like, I want power. The lobbyists, the pharmaceutical companies, we think they just want wealth. But there's men sitting there that want power more than everything. Very few men, if you give them a choice and say, do you really love money? Like, I'm going to give you material things. You get all the jewelry you want. Okay, you get all the jewelry. You get all the luxury designer clothing, but you have no power status. Very few men will take that. But if I say to you, look, bro, no jewelry, no Rolexes, but you walk in a room and men fear you, want to be you. Men, 80% of the time, take that. So power is a very sex-specific thing. Women, or at least the female sex, don't seem as driven by that. But to be clear, I find about 20% of women are also driven by status. Now, if you hold your hand up, I've never seen your hand. Can I see? Are you right or left? Okay. So this is digit index ratio. Pretty good science. Some scientists disagree with it, but there's about 40 studies. You have a lot of testosterone. You're a very driven, ambitious person. You're very similar to me. This is higher. This is prenatal testosterone, androgen kind of receptor. When you're in the womb, you get like this dosage, which sets the course of your life. You are probably more driven when you see a hand like this, and also you can do other testing to find this out. Driven a little bit like Nietzsche, the will to power, the will to be known, the will to be respected. You have a podcast. You're building a personal brand. By the way, there's nothing wrong about it. Sometimes people try to go, no, that's not me. I'm not materialistic. I'm more like Einstein. I don't believe that much in free will. If you read the Walter Isaacson book on Einstein, pretty smart guy. He's like, God, free will doesn't exist. Now that's, if you're a quantum physicist, you'll probably disagree and say that free will does exist. If you love power, some of it's predestined. You can see it in the womb. And so I think men have to come to grips with their will to power, because the will to power also can drive you, can be your demon. It can be your angel sitting here, or it can be your demon. Wealth and power are like a pit bull. And when they're on your side, they're wonderful guardians. But if they ever turn against you, they'll rip you to shreds.
That is very succinct. So the thing that I agree with all of that. And the thing that I would add is, once I came to understand that the true nature of money is to be a facilitator, in and of itself, it doesn't do anything. I mean, if you really think about it, and the analogy I'm about to make made a lot more sense before crypto. But what I used to tell people is money, cash, only has potential heat energy in and of itself. You can burn it, it will release heat. That's really all it has, except for the fact that we all say that thing is valuable, and therefore, as long as we believe in it, then it will carry some further potential in it. But the potential that it has, I think people always think it's going to make them feel about themselves the way they feel about other people that have money. So they look at that person and they admire them, they want to be them, they're driven by envy. I've heard you say that. Yes. I think that's pretty accurate. And they think, oh, all this envy that I have for that person, if I get the money, I will feel complete, powerful, amazing. But the reality is money can't touch how you feel about yourself.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I think the thing that people strive for is to feel a certain way about themselves, which is why if you say to somebody, you can be feared and admired, I think there's something about that, and there is an element of, I think part of that particular question, the thing that turns them on is, oh, they're going to fear me?
Yeah.
Because people instinctively know that they will then be able to wield their power.
Yeah.
Because if I were going to define power, I would say it's the ability to manifest your will. And I don't mean manifest in like a woo-woo sense. I mean manifest as in you close your eyes, you imagine the world you want to exist, you open your eyes, and you actually go make that world come true. And so the person maybe Putin is even more so just because he controls a country. But when I look at somebody like Elon Musk, and he can seemingly kick off billion-dollar companies at will, I mean, it's bananas. And that is somebody who imagines going to Mars and builds the thing necessary to get him there, including the legal battles and things that he's going to have to go through to make it all come true. The just brutality that is something that difficult, that expensive, that high risk. And so, all right, you've got wealth, which is really, it's just a facilitator. It's not going to touch who you are, but everybody thinks it's going to change how they feel about themselves. Then you have power, which is really about the ability to make things happen in the world.
Right.
And on that one, I think people tangle up because not everybody, it's become so commonplace to be disgusted by somebody like me who says, I'm here seeking power.
Right.
I come seeking power. I am trying to get as powerful as I can. Now, if you think that means I'm trying to hold dominion over other people and extract from them so that I can myself have, I get why you would think that's gross. But if you understand power the way that I understand it, which is power is agnostic. I could use it to manifest a will that is horrible. Hitler enters stage right. Or I could try to make the world a much better place. I can bring things to the world that are wonderful. Gandhi, Mother Teresa, right? They had a will to power that was extraordinarily strong. It just manifests in a way that we can all get behind versus somebody who's doing horrible things. But if people are able to tease the sort of emotion that they have around what they think money is without ever really thinking about it, or what they think power is without ever really thinking about it, from the reality of these evolutionarily granted tools, like if they can tease that apart, then they can say, okay, I'm going to bring these things on. I'm not going to pursue wealth for the sake of having money. There are things in my life I need to facilitate, and money is the great facilitator. Therefore, cool, I'm going to need some amount of money. And then, hey, I have a vision for a better world and I want to have impact. And so I need to get good at manifesting my will. But I don't think people understand that.
You need to read The Denial of Death, a famous book on this subject. I would just say, I agree, but remember the pit bull analogy. Power, wealth, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so the Denial of Death is an interesting book on the subject of what happens when we seek power.
So you recommend I read that as a warning?
Not a warning, but a deep dive into the repercussions. One of my mentor, Joel Salatin, used to say, the worst thing in life, Tai, is to grow old and realize you got good at the wrong thing. So I'm a big fan of go deep and what's the unconscious motivators. That everything that we think, we perceive, we want power and we want money is the conscious mind. But like Freud said, by the way, much of what you said was Freudian and Nietzschean, but the mind is like a iceberg, 10% above water, 90% sitting below. So I would say you have the way I would see you, if I might be so bold,
please,
in the unconscious mind, is you have a genetic predisposition towards mastery and status. Your mind, your conscious mind, you brought this up. We justify to ourselves. This is kind of the concept, the kind of outdated Freudian concept of the ego, the you had the ego and you kind of have this super ego, which is like collective society. But the simpler way to think about it is our genes make us want something unconsciously, and then our mind justifies it. Everybody justifies. Muammar Gaddafi, Kim Jong-un, he does not see himself as a bad man. He sees Adolf Hitler. There's a very famous story about Adolf Hitler. He kept a picture of a guy behind him, and this was an English soldier. In World War I, there was a battle. I think it's called Ypres, is how you pronounce it in Belgium. A young Adolf Hitler, unknown to the world, foot soldier, comes out of a tent or a little hut, no gun. He comes out with no gun. An English soldier has a rifle. And young Adolf Hitler says, "Don't shoot me. I'm unarmed." And the man said, for a split second, I thought, I'm going to kill him anyway. He's the enemy. But he said, I didn't like the morality of killing an unarmed man. I let him go. That was Adolf Hitler. That man felt guilty on that. That was 17. About 1939. Okay. Guess what happens? That man feels guilty every day. Adolf Hitler keeps that man's picture, calls him on his birthday annually. No joke. Thanks the man. And Hitler perceived that in the conscious mind, is proof that God was on his side. He had a vision for changing his people. It was a time when people were more nationalistic. All countries were nationalistic for the most part. So Adolf Hitler had this, he had a genetic predisposition. He had a horrible family upbringing. He had a dad who abused him physically, high levels of narcissism. If you read, there's a new book about the family of Adolf Hitler. I just read it about 2 months ago. You know, his dad, if you know how to read people, his dad had NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. We now know under fMRI machines, you're missing gray matter in your brain. So you don't even know you're a narcissist. His dad's a hyper narcissist, has all the attributes of it. Adolf Hitler, we know now narcissism is like 0.78 heritability. It's insane. So I told you I don't believe in free will. Adolf Hitler is born this man who is the product of a narcissist. He then goes through wars put on by big governments, which cause PTSD for people. He comes out of this already with a genetic predisposition to be a little bit wacky. On top of that, he sits through World War I, probably has literal artillery reverberations, like causes mental illness. But he never saw himself that way. He saw himself as a God warrior, and he had proof. If he was on the show, Adolf Hitler would have said, "What do you mean? I could have been shot." The Englishman, the hand of God came down and said, "I have a special purpose for this man." So I have to be careful that I'm not justifying my proclivities, my genetic predispositions, and saying, by golly, this is the right way. Now, I'm not saying your way is wrong. I'm just saying I try to think 360 about myself. Adolf Hitler was wrong. He was a madman, and his will to power was a complete lose-lose. He lost his life. Germany lost. My grandma's from Germany. My grandma met Adolf Hitler in 1936 at a park. Her best friend, Melina Meshman, who wrote a New York Times best-selling book you can read, and is dedicated to my grandma in the forward, asking my grandma for forgiveness because Melina Meshman turned my grandma's family in, and the SS kicked down the door. My grandma always told me she remembers it before she came here to California. She escaped. My grandma knew he was a madman in 1936. My grandma was good to read people. He came in a park. Melina Meshman, they were both about, this was in 1936. This is when Time magazine, the mass media was stupid back then. They made, Adolf Hitler was the man of the year on the cover of Time magazine. I think it was 1936. So my grandma was born in 18. So she's 18 years old. Melina Meshman says, "Marianne, there's an amazing man you need to meet. He's giving a small talk in our local park." My grandma goes there. She says a car pulls up. There's 50 people, 100 people there. There's no top on the car. It's convertible, Mercedes. A lot of billionaires made in the Nazi regime and war. And he starts yelling. My grandma's like, I hated the guy right away. My grandma didn't like people who yelled. Will to power, genes. We think we have free will. Did Adolf Hitler have free will? Einstein said no. Now, when I say this on social media, every Tom, Dick, and Harry writes, "Tai, you don't know what you're talking about." I'm like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to believe you over Einstein. I'm like, believe it or not, Einstein was a fairly smart guy. Now, there's newer physicists that disagree. Quantum physics kind of shows that things can appear out of nowhere, which is closer to our conception of morality, that people make a choice. But there's still a lot of machines that we literally have that show before you take an action, it appeared in your mind in the unconscious 10 seconds before, or 1/10 of a second before. Meaning what you perceive your conscious mind to say to do. Your unconscious told you to do it. We're the bitch of our brain. So going back to you, this is a long-winded, some people say I yap, but hey, I'm a professional yapper. You might be listening. Every once in a while in a yapping session, there's something to take away. I think you are, and me, and everybody in this room, we suffer from something called FDS, frequency dependent selection. Nature says, I like to diversify. In every country in the world, women, when they give birth, it's about 50% male sex, 50% female sex. There's a value in sexual reproduction. That's why there's two sexes. Some species don't do it. Ferns don't do it. Lesser evolved species, ferns, earthworms, they don't have male-female sex. But it's a diversification. in a community like in this room, I know in this room, not everybody sees the world like you. You're more of a will to power. About 25% of the world, especially men, was distributed the genes to seek mastery, status, power. But nature or God is smart. If there's too many people, and I'm more like you, if there's too many people like us, can you have all leaders with no followers? You must have people who follow. You can't have only architects for a beautiful house like you live in. You need somebody people to build the house. So nature FDS, frequency dependent selection, says, all right, we got enough of those guys. Let's present 25% of populations driven by mating.
Vanta automates up to 90% of compliance work for frameworks including SOC 2, ISO 27001, and HIPAA compliance, getting you audit ready in weeks instead of months and saving you up to 85% of associated costs. With over 200 integrations, you can easily monitor and secure the tools your business relies on. And Vanta scales with your business, helping you successfully enter new markets, land bigger deals, and earn customer trust. So join the 6,000 plus fast-growing companies already using Vanta to improve and prove their security so they can win more deals, shorten sales cycles, and deepen relationships. For a limited time, Vanta is offering Impact Theory listeners a free trial when you sign up at vanta.com/impact.
I just did a seminar with women CEOs. It was amazing. Women sometimes score as their unconscious motivators 95% mating. Some men do too. So nature goes, I want some people who care about love and family, but I don't want them all because I need a few Genghis Khans. I need a few. Sometimes population gets too big. I need the scourge of God that comes through and modulates a population so they don't overeat. Nature's been doing that for a long time. Attila the Huns, Stalin's, Putin. I'm not justifying what they do. I'm just recording history. This is the known history of man. Nature says, I want about 25% of people who actually like material things. There are people who get tremendous pleasure from holding a stack of cash. It's not me and you. Do you keep a lot of cash in your wallet?
Nope.
Yeah, I have a cousin. He is of that FDS. Nature said, I'm going to give you the genes. He likes physical things. You know who those people become? Those people become, sometimes are great artists because artist is holding a thing like a sculptor. They like the thing. Michelangelo was probably a thing-driven person. He says, I saw in the sculpture, he said, I saw in the rock the treasure. He could see. That's a material-driven person. Me and you, I don't care. Like if I wasn't on camera, I don't know what I'd be wearing right now. I'm everywhere wearing a tank top. I'm not. When I did my Here in My Garage video, people didn't believe me when I said Here in My Garage, but here's my new Lambo. But you know what I like more than material things? Knowledge, because I am a movement freedom person. So it'd be interesting. I haven't quizzed you, but you may be. Let me ask you this. You got a choice. I wire you $1 billion, okay? You're already rich, but let's say I wire you $100 billion, okay? Cash, no after tax. But you must be celibate, no love, no romance for the next 10 years. And your wife, you got a great wife, I was just talking to her, you guys got to live apart for 10 years. You're just a solo man. Or you have a massive love, and you got $1 million is all you'll ever have in your bank account. Which one are you taking?
$1 million, very easy.
Okay. Next. So that's mating higher than material. Okay, next. You can have the love. This $1 million in your bank account at all times. Not extraordinary wealth, but wealth. No freedom. You will have to go no further than 1 mile from this house. People can come to you, no freedom, and you must work on a 9 to 5 schedule. Normal, 9 to 5, Monday, even if you work for yourself, Monday to Friday, okay? So you get the love, no freedom, or you get the freedom, but your wife got to be apart, no sex for 10 years. Which one you take? I like this.
I would really need to understand the reality is I would trade nothing for my wife. So if we had to be apart for 10 years, basically you could do anything but rob me of my health and I'm always going to choose my wife. But that's my wife versus if I were single, I would make
Let's say the first month you met her.
First month I met her, I was not in love yet. So
But no women, no sex, 10 years.
That would.
Are you taking the freedom?
Yeah,
the
that would
mating?
be what I would advise myself, unless I
No, but I
knew-
care about the unconscious. Where are you going?
What would I have done back then?
Even now, fast forward, pretend you had been single all these years. You just met your wife. You're getting along 3 months, but you're going to have to break it off, and you have ultimate freedom. You do what you want, no schedule. You travel. You got a little bit of money, not much, but
Life has nothing better to offer you than love, so I'll take love.
okay, love. Last, you keep the love, but you're an unknown soul. You wield no power. You wield no respect. You have no real impact on the world. You might have it on your mom, dad, friends. You're anonymous, but you got love.
Yep.
Or you have the ultimate will to power. You are both loved and feared, as Conan the Barbarian would say, or Genghis Khan. The thoughts in your mind become real and you change the world, but you are celibate for the next 10 years, assuming you had just met your wife. Now which one?
Yeah, I mean, assuming that I had just met my wife, I would, and didn't know. You have to kill my now understanding that life has nothing better to offer you than love. So now, from this perspective, for sure, the love.
Okay.
But at the time, in no way, shape, or form would I have chosen anything other than being able to build and create the things I wanted to build and create, for sure.
That's what I thought, because notice the way you speak of the world and the conscious. You just gave me a long talk before I gave my long talk about how you can change the world with power, and money gives you more mastery. You don't want the material things. What we just talked about just unfolded. I would say you're primarily, environmentally, you've now become mating driven. You were born mastery and status, and you taught yourself to be wiser. Okay, very few people do that. You're more advanced than the average person. But these are very strong impulses. And this one's so strong that if I talk to your wife, she's not here, one day we'll have to have a round table with her there. You probably naturally continually pull this way. There's probably a tension in your marriage that sometimes she has to check and say, no, love is more important. You're trying to influence too much the world.
She wouldn't say it in that term, but you're 100% correct. So in my marriage, because we agree that our marriage is our highest priority.
Yes.
Because there's nothing I value more than what my relationship has given me. Not success, not adoration. Literally, all of that pales in comparison to truly being seen and loved and building something together and sharing a life. Just really is, if you're wired like me, it is the peak of what life has to offer you. And it's extraordinary. And I could never have imagined something so wonderful. However, that doesn't stop me from having this incredible drive to want to have impact. I mean, obviously it's called impact theory for a reason. So that really, really matters to me. And being able to balance the two, and this is, I think, the core of my thesis, because all I'm saying is I want people to understand what money and power actually are.
Right.
Because once you know that that thing in your hand is a sword and not a hammer, but that a hammer exists, then when you need a hammer, go get a hammer. When you need a sword, go get the sword. And I think people are really delusional about what they are, because from the outside, the only way to map the territory is with your emotion about how you feel about people that have that thing. And so it gives myself, very much included, a warped sense of what it is. So for the first decade of my entrepreneurial career, I was just chasing money. And it made me profoundly unhappy. Now, had I not gone down that road of chasing money, getting money, and still being unhappy, then I never would have realized, oh, wait, this isn't the game. So to your point of
you should have traced mastery from day one. That's what I would have told you. I would have told you to be like a Tony Robbins. I would have told you to be a leader of men. That's fine. Look, man,
Here's what's interesting, though.
The ultimate scam in this world is I literally am one of the only people talking about this. All those fucking a million therapists. What the fuck are therapists and psychologists doing? Sometimes people, when I do a talk like this, they go, Tyler, are you you're speaking on health? Are you a doctor? You're speaking on psychology? Are you a psychologist? Are you're speaking on business? Do you have a Harvard MBA? I go, have you noticed Doctors have failed us. Nobody's healthy in America. Almost nobody. Everybody's unhappy. Psychologists have failed us. Have you noticed that most people are poor? Economists and business teachers have failed us. So I've gone on my own. And it's a tragedy that I have to do this, but I do this with opportunity. I make my message. You and I are the victim of a time in history. The rise, there's 3 trends. I just wrote a new book, The 3 Trends. Trend number 1 is the rise and fall of governments. It still corrupts us now. We went through government schools. Did you go to college?
Yeah.
Okay, I dropped out. That they charge you $80,000 to $200,000 of debt to go to college and university, and they never have you take a quiz or do anything. Fuck career counseling bullshit. They don't do shit. They don't help you know the unconscious mind. It would have been better for you to seek mastery first. And the good news is you've come full circle like a boomerang. You're back to it. I could have predicted that 10 years ago. No matter what, you'll come back to the will to power. What were your mom and dad like?
You'd probably have to ask me questions to get an answer. My mom is
Who
high
was
anxiety.
sure they're right more?
Neither of them.
No?
To their detriment.
Who overthought things?
My mom.
How would you describe your dad?
He doesn't know how to manifest his will. He feels like you make the best out of life. He had a thing on his desk that I remember to this day in his office that said the beatings will continue until the morale improves. And I remember when I first saw it, I found that absolutely hysterical. And then as I've gotten older, I realized, oh my God, my dad believed himself to be a cog in the machine, and his only outlet was acerbic humor.
But are you sure your dad didn't have a will to power? But at the time in history, men were emasculated, and there wasn't social media. There wasn't the ability to start your own business. Are you sure your dad didn't have the will to power?
I think everybody has the will to power to an
There's many
extent.
people that don't.
So you don't see it as a spectrum. You see it as a binary switch.
Oh, no, for sure there's a spectrum. But at some point on a 1 to 100 scale,
so my dad's low,
fall
for
off.
sure. Very low.
I'd like to meet your dad.
Yeah,
Is he alive?
I'm guessing you take that because genetics play a big role in your worldview.
No, because he was conscious of the fact he was making jokes. There's an ancient proverb, much truth is said in jest. Mm-hmm. Your dad would, what we make jokes about, what we self-deprecate, is often our unconscious mind that we're not powerful enough to do. So many men, I saw this the second I put a Lamborghini video out. All the virtue signaler men said, I don't care about Lamborghinis. Who's this douchebag? Those guys specifically commenting, they were the ones who wanted the Lambo, but they couldn't get it. So it's called pain avoiding delusion. You see it ultimately, sometimes people have full psychotic breaks with reality, but how do we cope with the pain of this world? We pretend we don't want that thing. But the fact that your dad had a joke on his desk means it was bubbling to the top.
Yeah, so I think everybody has the will to power, for sure. Now, you may...
I don't think they do.
Okay, so just a second ago I asked you, is this on a spectrum? Yes, no, or is it binary? Because if it's on a spectrum, then I will give you, some people are going to be way lower on the spectrum. I'll even give you that it probably breaks way more men are way more will to power than women. All of that makes sense anecdotally with what I see out in the world. But, and look, I have not sat down and like broken down my dad, but experientially, I will say that my dad is so content in his life now, outside of, he's no longer working, he's retired, and he loves his life. Now, his life is the classic puttering around the house.
What did he do?
He was a purchasing manager.
So, what about your grandparents?
Now, my grandfather, on his side, he died when my dad was 6 months old, so I never met him. But from just what he did in life, was very high on the will to power.
Which is what?
He was an inventor, and he had some patents, and ended up getting in a scandalous relationship with my grandmother, who was 44 years younger than him, at a time where that was like, clutch the pearls.
Your dad was DiCaprio.
Yeah. My grandfather, yeah.
Your grandfather.
Yeah.
DiCaprio Bilyeu.
Yes, exactly. So he ended up having to sell all his patents and move to a small town, which is why by the time I got to my dad, there was no money, and he grew up without a dad.
But that's also mating driven.
Terms. Yes, and I don't know him, so I literally have no idea
I tell
what he
people,
was
go
really
deep
like.
into your genes. You're 25%. Is it people? Parents are 50% related to you. Grandparents are 25.
You tell people that because you want them to understand themselves.
Yes.
It's interesting. So you and I agree. That's
Yeah.
super powerful. You need to understand yourself. Amazing. But I am fatalistic when it comes to genes. So I'm just like, look, you are 50% of you roughly is hardwired. You're not going to be able to change it. So understanding it, very useful. But the 50% of you that's malleable is where I focus. So if you and I were being interviewed separately, you would tell a tale of know your genetics, understand how this all plays out, don't fight. In fact, one of the quotes that I pulled from you was, it's something like, here it is, biology is God and society is man-made. And you were basically saying, don't fight the Fed, don't fight biology. Like
Yes.
you are a slave to your genes.
Yes.
Now that gives me hives. I agree with you.
People don't like that one.
It isn't that I don't like it. So here, in fact, everybody says that if you are not religious, you do have a God. I have a God, and that God is effectiveness. I am obsessed with effectiveness. Now, all of that for me is predicated on, I believe that your goal ought to be honorable so that you don't end up with a Hitler who's very effective at killing people. That is not interesting to me. I don't celebrate that. But if you're trying to build something honorable, now I'm like, hey, motherfucker, if you are not paying attention to what works and what does not work, you are making a huge mistake. So I get it. There's some amount of me that is absolutely hardwired and there's nothing I'm going to be able to do to stop it. Cool. I'm not going to fight that because I think you're right. But I am going to spend an inordinate amount of time focused on the part of me that can change. And now, if you understand you are both things you can't change, and so you better understand them and be able to contend with them and do not become their slave. This is why I tell people to become, you must get emotional control because evolution is fucking with you. But over here, there are things that you can change. And just all of my thinking, everything that I do is optimized for the part I can change. So I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. What I'm trying to get people to focus on is, please don't think you're a blank slate, which is, I think, a big part of where you're coming from. The just madness that I'm watching unfold with what's happening in society when we're no longer being chased by a lion, and so people can indulge any intellectual fantasy that's totally detached from what's effective.
You know who predicted this, by the way?
Crazy. Nietzsche, for
Karl
sure.
Marx. So
Tell
I'm not
me
a
more.
communist. In fact, this weekend I'm going on a debate where I'm the
What
capitalist.
did he predict exactly?
He basically predicted if you create too much wealth and ease, people go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. That was one of his things against capitalism. He's like, communists, we're all going to stay farmers. Now, communism failed in his conception, but he was right about that thing. I give him man credit. Now, when it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the bottom, when we're all kind of farmers like the Amish, they have 500% less depression than modern society. Because everybody's like, I got to milk the cow, and you just stay. You don't try to think you're more important. But as we move up Maslow's hierarchy of need, the top is individual expression. So I saw an art exposition in New York City where there was a group watching them, and the art was, he was using his body as a cheese grater. And somebody was lifting him up and down and he was grating cheese, and people were like, wow, this is magnificent art. And I was thinking, Karl Marx was right. Karl Marx, this guy's insane. He needs a farm. This guy needs to be milking a cow or cutting down a tree for firewood. I agree with you on that. By the way, on genetics, it's domain specific. IQ is like mostly IQ, height, eye color, skin color is like 80+% heritable. Some things aren't heritable at all. If we all are in a car crash at 100 miles an hour, there's no heritability. You can't have inherited a gene to withstand that if you don't have a seatbelt on. So you always got to think about, there's things you can change. You know that there's an AA, Alcoholics Anonymous prayer. I don't remember. It's the Serenity prayer. It's like, God, give me the strength to change the things that I can change, and the serenity to accept the
I think I have it
things.
here. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom
to know the difference. That's kind of a woo-woo way of what we know scientifically is there's some you can't. But my thing about going to your ancestors, we don't have to talk about this forever. We need to do a psychology talk at one point, but everybody's lost in this world. I rarely find somebody who's on the right path. Now, a simple thing.
Can you define the right path first?
Know thyself. First piece of self-help in modern world. The Oracle of Delphi. You go to Greece, there was a cave, and they wrote on the wall the best advice that mankind had up to that point. And the first piece of advice was know thyself. But back then, they didn't understand what Nietzsche said, the mind's an impenetrable fortress. You only learn about yourself through friends and enemies. That's why, the best advice, practical advice you can have on what career to take? What enemies compliment you on. Because an enemy never gives you a false compliment. So I have people who love my brand, people who die for me, literally. I had somebody hack me the other day, and a random guy wrote me on WhatsApp. Don't know how he got my number. He's like, I hacked the hacker. And I was like, who are you? He's like, dude, you've saved my life. You'll never know. You never have to know I am. You've made me millions of dollars. Whoa. Fuck that guy. I destroyed him. So a bigger hacker attacked some random hacker. So I have people who love me, and I have people who I'm a force. I split people down the middle. And the people who don't like me, I still listen to their compliments. Like, fuck that guy. He's just a good marketer, but he doesn't know what he's talking about. Then I become a marketer. Fuck that guy. I don't agree with anything he said on that podcast. He's damn entertaining to listen to. Then I become an entertainer. So go back, my mom, who's sitting right there. My mom used to, even your own parents will give you compliments when they're maddest at you. Tai, I'm so mad at you. My mom says, you're a bulldog. When you believe in something, you won't stop. Well, that's my strength too. When I build a business, if it's failing, I'll stick with it till I rebuild it. So know thyself, listen to the compliments of thine enemies. That's one. I used to say, you do this thing I called it Eulerian destiny, like geometry. You take 4 circles where they all connect what you should do with life. So number 1 is the compliment of enemies, or the compliments of your mom when she's mad at you also count. The other circle is thine ancestors. When we say know ourself, what is ourself? We are the DNA is, some scientists think, the most magical thing on earth. Einstein said the most magical thing on earth was compound interest. Other smart people, and I agree with them, said the most profound thing they haven't figured out is, what is DNA? Where did it come from? Did aliens seed the planet? We don't understand. It's the closest thing to having been immortal. So when I say I'm Tai Lopez, am I Tai Lopez, or am I my mom Andrea and my dad Ernesto and his father? And so know thy ancestors, because in ancestors you will find the clues to your strengths and weaknesses. And so in my ancestors, what are strengths? I mean, one of my great-grandfather was I have many great scientists in my family. Martin Birkenrode, my mom's dad, is a famous scientist. He was a child prodigy and taught at Yale before he had an undergrad degree. So teaching. Now, what's the weaknesses? There's much mental illness in my family. My dad had NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, probably a level of psychopathy too. He ended up in prison. You can see the prison from here, Long Beach, Terminal Island. So he had a temper. My dad will kill you. No problem. Everybody has this thing about, I grew up talking back to my parents. I didn't grow up with my dad all the time, but ain't nobody ever talked back to my dude come out of prison. My dad was an OG. He's blind in one eye. It's like knife wounds and all this stuff from Harlem. But that's a weakness you have to control. I have to control rage and anger. So the second circle you draw, you got your compliments of enemies, and you draw your ancestors, and make sure you at least, I like to go back to great-grandparents. Great-grandparents have 12.5%. So you have 8 great-grandparents, that's 8.5%. They're as related to you as your 2 damn parents, who are 50%. Your parents are just a more concentrated version of that. Okay, so then the third one is what you talk about consciously on a Saturday night when you're not working. I talk a lot about psychology when I'm not working. It makes sense that I became a marketer. It became sense that I became an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship, you make money when you know people. Isn't it ironic that the man consistently the richest in the last 10 years is, some of them, Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, these people did a lot of psychology courses too. Psychology make you wealthy. Elon Musk, the best applied psychologist on this earth. Oh, I watch him effective altruism manipulate the soul of mankind. And hopefully, like you said, for the will to power, it's for good. But don't ever think he's not a master puppet man who's now he bought Twitter, so he now has 5% of the globe. Check his app and he can weave the web. He's the Spider-Man, not the Batman. So you need to, what do you talk about on a Saturday night? That's the third circle. And the fourth circle, what you been doing? Because there's a lot of clues on what you've been doing. What were you doing before Impact Theory?
Quest.
Well, before Quest.
It was a software company. None of those things will get you where you want to go.
But what before that?
Yeah,
what were you doing at 14?
Filmmaking.
Filmmaking.
Yeah. Yeah, that.
Mastery status, to be known, to be. It is. It's an expression.
Well, so ironically, yes. I didn't think of it that way. So
Never do.
I'll explain it how I thought of it, and then you can help me go a layer deeper. So the way that I understood myself at that time was I clearly have a much bigger emotional reaction to a film than other people. I'm more drawn in. I have a stronger emotional reaction. I remember them longer. They really began to shape my sense of the world. So for instance, The Matrix to me is a perfect metaphor for the human condition. So when I saw that movie, it actually gave me a framework with which to think. And so I often tell people I think in movies. So there's a whole series of things where I'm a hyper responder to that art form. But I also, at 14, was a hyper responder to poetry. So I remember one day going, okay, do we become a poet or do we become a filmmaker? And the reason I became the filmmaker, you're going to love this, is because there was no money in poetry and I could get rich in film. Because this is like the 80s, early 90s when Hollywood is still popping off.
When Hollywood had status.
Yes. Oh, for sure.
You're not a money guy. I don't think you don't have jewelry. You're dressed nonchalant. You're a status, but mating is there. So it's like you said, it's like I want to be a poet. What do poets do well with? If you're an ugly dude, become a poet. Poets do well with women, my friend.
Man, you know some poets I don't know.
Pablo Neruda. I mean, you read Pablo Neruda to a woman, wordsmithing. I mean, yeah, not all poets, but many. Well, what do you think Drake is? What do you think
I think Drake is a
are?
pop star. I do not think he's a poet. Now he is
wordplay.
Yeah, but he uses ghostwriters, and so I've heard. I am not a Drake scholar, but yeah, that's interesting because going back to your earlier point, he's somebody that can control culture. Now, people that understand people,
like you.
They understand the cultural movements.
Mating mastery.
It's very possible.
That would have been a good. You're in your thing. You did it. You did it. Life came full circle. You tried to move away from your Eulerian destiny, and
I did not try. Everything
you went after
in
money.
my life. So here's the tale. It's funny. We were just talking about this before I started rolling. People do not know me for the thing that I consider myself. I consider myself an artist. I am obsessed with storytelling, video games, filmmaking, comic books. Like that is my life. It has been my life since I was 12 years old. From the time I was 12, I knew that I was going to be a storyteller.
Yes.
Now, the bad news is that graduating in the late 90s from film school, I did not know how to break into the industry. YouTube doesn't exist. There's no cell phone with a camera. A no-budget film was $100,000. I'd never met anybody with that kind of money. So end up teaching film, meet these two very successful guys. They're like, look, you're coming to the world with your hand out, and if you want to be a filmmaker, you're going to have to control the resources. And so I was like, okay, I need to get rich. I'll go into business. I thought it would take 18 months. It took 15 years, but it worked. So all of the chasing money and all of that was just so that I could do what I'm finally doing now. That's right. Now, if I were to recommend to somebody a strategy, this would not be the one.
That's right. Go straight what you want.
Correct. Which brings us back to my God, which is effectiveness.
You needed my Eulerian destiny, this talk.
I did.
I needed it too.
Where were you?
No, I needed
25 years ago.
I needed it. You know why I became what I am? When I was 19, I went to a talk. One of the first millionaires I knew was a guy named Alan Nation. He spoke in a little town of Virginia. And I came up and I had questions. What do I do? And and I said, nobody seems to have the answer. I said, nobody seems to have the answer. And he said, that means you have to become that person. And so I've spent my life becoming the person that could give me the answers that I couldn't find from the world at 19. I found my destiny too. You found yours. That's why I said, nature laughs last. Or, you ever heard of the movie Of Mice and Men?
Yes, of course.
Famous movie?
Yep, famous book.
Famous book. Well, the full poem goes something like, the best laid plans of mice and men go awry. It's like we have our conceptions, but in the end, God laughs last and says, in my frequency dependent selection, I need you to be this. You will be this. And some people become it, which is you. You won. And some people don't. I think that's your dad. But your dad won through you. Your dad, it would have been very interesting. You should ask your dad, what did he want to do at 14? Your dad, you might be the winner. Your dad, you know what I bet you it is? I'll tell you something interesting that people don't talk enough about. That's crazy mind-blowing to me. We can read people in many ways. You know, my cockiest thing about myself is I will put $1 million down and go head-to-head at anybody at cold reading people. I think I'm the best person at reading people, and I don't even think the second best is 50% as good as me. And I will put money, and I will swipe money. Anybody want to go to Vegas and lose their money? Put $1 million down. We'll go cold read a long street of people. Now, that's my narcissistic side coming out, okay? I have acknowledgement of this. But you're allowed to be narcissistic in one thing, and people will give you that. If you start getting too narcissistic, people get mad. But Jung, you should listen to Jung on YouTube. YouTube is a gift to mankind. Before he died, some interviewer interviewed Carl Jung, the disciple of Freud, one of the greatest men to ever live. And there's a quote I keep on my phone. This is, if you ever want to write a quote down and get a tattoo, write this quote down. He wrote a textbook. By the way, the concept of introvert extrovert was invented by Jung. He invented the worm. He also invented the word psyche that we use now. Or sorry, persona. So listen to this. This is a mind-blowing. He wrote a book called Psychological Types. In respect of one's own personality, one's judgment is as a rule extraordinarily clouded. So I meet people. One of the ways I read people is I'm like, tell me what you think of yourself. And then I'm like, okay, that's what they're not. So I've cut out 50% of the thing. Your dad's self-conception. He's probably opposite. But remember what Thoreau said, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What's called resignation is confirmed desperation. Your dad eventually resigned himself. And he's like, he was stuck in a matrix in time where it was very hard to be an entrepreneur. When Jeff Bezos started in 94, he had to borrow from his parents about $250,000 to put a website up. That was the rise of corporates. There's 3 trends every man and woman needs to know to create wealth. The first trend in modern civilization was the rise and fall of governments. There was a time where government cared about you. There was a time when the U.S. in the 1800s, there was less than 1% income tax. The government wasn't out to exploit you. There was a time when there were men like Abraham Lincoln, who was no saint, but he wasn't there trying to get rich. He wasn't going to retire from the presidency and make $1 million with a Netflix thing or a book special. I forgot, one of the recent presidents made Obama has a $100 million book deal after. There was no opportunity. Abraham Lincoln died. So did JFK. So there was a time when governments were there for you. They weren't overreaching. There wasn't much taxation. They weren't printing too much money, so there wasn't much inflation. And there weren't so much corruption. You know that Abraham Lincoln, every single day, I think Monday through Friday, he had the White House open. You could walk in and talk to the president. They had a line in the 1800s. You could talk to them. They were accessible. That has fallen. What we've seen through recent events, COVID and other events, government is nobody's waking up thinking about you, but they're probably there to fuck you. Elizabeth Warren passes a law that allows her to continue to trade stocks, so she makes hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe on inside information. Nobody knows. I don't know. But I've heard people say it. Abraham Lincoln wasn't trading stocks from his position. He died. He died because he was an accessible person, and madmen came in. So it was the rise and fall of governments. Then, what was next? The rise and fall of... Trend 2 was the rise and fall of corporations, and your dad was a victim of that. See, starting, let's say, 1920s, you had the rise of corporations. You had Coca-Cola, you had IBM. They were nameless, faceless corporations. People got trapped in the 9 to 5. That's the matrix. Your dad probably had he was a purchasing agent. He was stuck in that thing. You could not start a business on your own if your parents weren't rich. Like, even in 94, to put a website up cost, in that time, was $200,000. Dollar inflation adjusted, that cost $1 million. Now you go to Shopify or WordPress, you put a website up for $0. So 2020, you had the rise and fall of governments being useful to you. You had the rise and fall of corporations. You know, corporations used to be loyal to you. You had a job in the 1950s. You got a pension. You retired at 60. They didn't fire you. That's all gone now. The rise and fall of corporations, they'll fuck you, not help you. So what's left? The rise of the individual. And you're early trend catcher. And I'm an early trend catcher, but it just started really in 2020. And so what you were able to do that your dad could not do, because he was stuck in that, I call it not the matrix, I call it the machine. It was still the corporate machine. He didn't have the opportunity to express his will to power. But the good news is he lives on through you. And you did it because there's now tools for the individual to win. Before, to do a show like this, I remember in my time, where to buy TV space, because there was no internet, you had to have $1 million up front to run commercials. I remember reaching out from Raleigh, North Carolina. I want to run a nationwide commercial. And the guy selling TV ad said, yeah, it'll be $1 million. I'm like, what? But now the rise of individual, you can start a Facebook ad for $5. So we live in better times. And so everybody has to catch the rise of the individual. As I told you, it used to be the government would give you good health advice. Now the government has lied to everybody about health. And it's been that way. In the 50s, they were wrong. And they said you should eat margarine, not butter. You shouldn't give your babies breast milk. You should give them formula. So now you become an individual. You figure out your own. You used to be stuck in a classroom that taught you nothing. Now it's the rise of individual. Educate thyself. You in a small community. You build a tribe now. You in a tribe. And so it's good times, man. Good times. Everything's good. To quote the famous comedian, what's his name? That got canceled, but now is back. Everything's amazing and everybody's anxious. Everything's amazing. Build a website for $0. You could self-educate yourself. You could go to a gym. I think most gyms have an $8 a month thing. People didn't even know about gyms 100 years ago. Now you can get in shape, reverse aging with, weights, reverse aging. So everything's amazing. But as Karl Marx said, we're too high up the Maslow hierarchy of needs. That's why I tell people, you know what you do? Here's a hack. I have never told people this on a podcast, but I'll tell you, Tom. What you do is you have the wealth of the top of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but you take the cautionary tale from Karl Marx and you live closer to the bottom of hierarchy of need. That's why I spend half my time on a farm now. A little log cabin. I can have big mansion. I've lived in a big mansion, 17 bedrooms, 18 bathrooms. I got a little log house built by the Amish. Keep yourself grounded or you will go kooky. And we live in a society where people are never be stuck with one species. People are stuck in cities with one species. Yeah, they got the little poodle dogs, which most people don't even like their dogs because they keep their dogs trapped in a little apartment. Dogs want to be free, but whatever. I'm not insulting anybody. But if you really cared about the dog, no dog's happier in a city. I know it's a necessary evil, but get away. Find a little piece of land. 90% of the world lives urban now. That means there's going to be 90% insanity in this world. You got to get to the bottom of where you're just having, I told your wife this before. I was like, you guys should buy a little farm. She's like, I'm a city person. I'm like, but for your sanity. For your sanity, don't spend all the time in the city. Rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Everybody says men talk about the Roman Empire. Why? Years ago, I read Gibbons, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. He said it became too urban. Too many lawsuits, too much corruption of politicians. They used to say, we got to go back to our old Roman ways when we lived on the farm and out in nature, And so many empires have fallen when they become too urban. So the Greek Empire, city-states, all this is a problem. Get back out. Native Americans were happy, and the Amish are the closest things to Native Americans, and they are the happiest people, man. It's crazy.
Okay, we're going to have to clash worldviews here. So
good, let's do it.
I think there's so much about what you're saying that I agree with very much. I think it's bang on.
It's more interesting when you disagree.
Okay, so the thing that I agree with, one, just on the last part, I think that getting back to nature is very interesting. And while both my wife and I are very much city people,
yeah.
to your point about you really have to map yourself, even if you're talking to your enemies, to figure out exactly who you are. I completely buy what Nietzsche said about we really are blind to ourselves, and it's only through feedback. We actually have a system here at Impact Theory that we got from Ray Dalio called the dot collector. And the dot collector allows people to give you real-time feedback constantly all the time on like 40 different variables. And then over time, you develop this cloud of dots that really begins to tell you, are you good at this thing or not good at that thing? And it is pretty surprising how often you're not good at something you thought you were good at. So that has certainly been eye-opening. But
1,600, the average man overestimates his ability to win at a street fight by 1,600%.
Jesus.
You ever meet men? It's like, that's what I told you. Men are out here so out of shape now, they're pulling muscles during podcasts. But man's like, I could whip this guy's ass.
Yeah.
Anyway,
a
sorry
little bit. Not at all. A little bit of delusion goes a long way. The most delusional people are the happiest. So,
but they die younger. You know that they die. I went to Argentina.
If you run into a fight that you were that outmatched, yes, you're going to die younger.
I went to Buenos Aires. My friend got married there. He's Argentinian, and his karate teacher went, who was a very overweight Asian dude who overestimated. He literally, when we're all flew down the same time, he goes, "I'm a black belt. I got you all protected." He's like, he was real cocky. He's like, I know what I'm doing. You looked at the guy. You're like, bro, you can't even protect yourself from donuts. How are you going to protect us in Argentina? We land in Argentina. First day we go visit. It's called the Pink House. It's their version of the White House. Guess who's the first man robbed?
That guy.
That guy. He overestimated. He wore a Rolex in Buenos Aires. You don't wear Rolexes in South America. A motorcycle. Somebody came up, tapped him on the shoulder. He had a backpack. Said, your backpack's open. Another dude came so it distracted him. Another dude came on a moped and grabbed his watch off while he was like looking back. The other dude jumped onto it. So this fat karate guy is running down the street after a moped full of with two guys on his stoles. I ran him down. I said, bro, what you gonna do when you get there? You gonna stop? Both dudes gonna turn around and stab you to death. You know, overestimation of men. Men also overestimate their looks. You know, women. There are delusional women, but more men think they're good looking that are ugly than women do. That surprises people because now society's saying women are more delusional. Women get quicker feedback. Other women, if they act too pretty, women pop in their DMs and say, you ain't that good. Guys never care about their other friends' looks. Anyway, off on a tangent.
Very interesting. Well, I mean, it's all related to the same idea of understanding yourselves, the foibles that we all have, psychology being at the root of this. I mean, it really, the reason I wanted to start this interview with you in particular on this is I really do think you are good at identifying what people are like, which is exactly what made you such an effective marketer. And so the delineation I'm trying to draw, because I think it really is going to matter in people's lives, is there is what is, and then there is what could be. And I think even though I actually don't believe in free will, you have to act as if it is real. Otherwise, you slide to nihilism. And I don't think that's an effective strategy. And even if I'm just pre-programmed to say that, hey, I'm doing my job. So to me, no matter what, you need to act as if you have free will. You need to look at the different branching options in front of you and say which one is going to, and what I advise people to do, identify your goal, and then what choice is going to be most effective in moving you towards your goal. Very simple. So taking my dad, and Dad, I love you, sorry to drag you into this podcast. The way that I would look at that is that my dad did not have the right ideas to build his frame of reference.
Yeah.
And if you build the wrong frame of reference, which quick encapsulation, your frame of reference is your values and your beliefs. So your values are what you believe ought to be true of yourself in the world, and your beliefs are what you believe to actually be true about you and the world. So one is sort of a moral judgment and the other is just a recognition of fact. The problem is we're terrible at recognizing facts. So we oftentimes, especially if we don't know ourselves well, we're painting ourselves into a corner that keeps us smaller than we need to be. Now, because my life is so evenly divided into me before said ideas and me after said ideas, I know the path that I was on. My parents taught me to be a good employee, to keep my head down, do as little work as possible, and avoid punishment at all costs. So that's how I was raised. And then I realized to achieve my goals, that playbook isn't going to work. And because I rank high in mating, all of this comes down to I feel ashamed that I'm not living up to my then girlfriend, now wife, what I told her I was going to do and become. in order to win her affections and be able to sleep with her and all the amazing stuff.
Schopenhauer said men are just driven by three things: food, sex, and maybe boredom too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Although I do like you tagged a fourth one onto that, which was envy, right?
Yes, I have my own. Not that I'm smart enough to maybe so bold to correct Schopenhauer, but studies in pessimism, I threw a little tweak in it. Envy.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
You know how many men do shit that they don't want to do, but they got to beat that guy over there?
Yes.
Like, I don't even want these shoes, but this guy has the shoes, therefore I will have the shoes that I don't care about. Yeah.
Even if it's not pathological. So for instance, we build video games.
Yeah.
And you always want to work a leaderboard into your video game because it's fun. Even if it's only like the leaderboard only shows you and your friends.
Yes.
It's still fun to be like, oh, I managed to beat you. I climbed up the ranks.
Snapchat was the first thing to threaten. Now TikTok has threatened Mark Zuckerberg's empire of Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. But the first one to threaten it was the youngest billionaire up to that time of Evan Spiegel. I think he was a billionaire at 24.
Whoa.
Married a supermodel. Came out of nowhere. I'm talking 2 years or something. I forget the story. I think he got fired from something else. Like, fuck them, I'm going to build Snapchat. Becomes a billionaire. Snap score. So, Pete, the more you snapped, you would do streaks and all this bullshit. I remember, dude, Snap really helped me. I caught it. I'm talking about catching trends. I was one of the first people to 1 million followers on Snap. They wouldn't tell you how many you had, which I think was a mistake. They hid the envy. But my rep told me, you hit 1 million. I remember Kylie had 10 million.
Jesus.
But they would highlight me on the Snap story. I got 18 million views one time on my story. On the first Snap. It was crazy. But anyway, yes. Going back to your thing. Snapchat was smart. Just by Snap score, they basically caught up to a 10-year-old Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that can do the new thing, that can tap into the psychology
but then
better.
add envy.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly is one of the plays. My thing is, so going back to my dad, he had a frame of reference that was not effective. If his goal was, I really want to exert my will into the world, I want to do the things that I think are amazing. If you had asked him, and I know because I have, the thing he wanted to do was work on cars for a living. That was the thing he just loved. Yes. But anyway, he lets himself get trapped in expectations. He shouldn't have had kids. He has kids. That takes you down a certain path.
Shouldn't have had kids. You wouldn't be here.
He shouldn't have had kids. No, my dad will be the first to tell you he shouldn't have had kids. But that he did, he's obviously so kind and loving, and I love my dad, and we get along great. And he's like, look, I shouldn't have had kids, but now it's the greatest joy of my life. Like, I mean, the whole thing.
People should have kids.
We'll get into that because I actually agree with you despite the fact that I'm not having kids,
right.
But I think it's the safest path
forward. But you're not done.
I'm done, yeah.
We'll see. Have you ever been sure of something and changed your mind?
Yeah, but let's say I changed my mind. My wife is 44. So, bon chance, my friend. We'd have to go way the fuck out of our way. Anyway, we'll come back to that. Very interesting, super important conversation. And as a PSA, I think the vast majority of people, if you want, but if you're on the fence, the vast majority of people should, for reasons of populating the world and fulfillment. I think fulfillment is the reason I say it. But okay, so anyway, my dad, frame of reference, not moving. He doesn't have a growth mindset, so he doesn't believe I can do anything that I set my mind to.
Sorry for defacing your property.
That's okay.
I owe you.
So,
Adrian, put it on my bill. 1 armrest. I like this. You should just keep it this way forever.
As a sign that you were here?
Yeah, I know when people ask, you just say, I had this maniac
Tai Lopez
and
was
you don't have to
so
say my name.
strong.
There was a maniac here, and we argued about free will. And he, started ripping things and throwing, just exactly
free will,
embellish.
I think, is
this
the
is
one
Hollywood.
thing we won't have to argue about.
But you got to embellish. This is Hollywood. Hollywood doesn't tell the truth, man.
I have a very difficult time embellishing. It's not my shtick.
You have cartoons on the wall. They're not real. That's embellishment.
Interesting. Storytelling to you is embellishment.
Well, cartoons, I see Wonder Woman there. There ain't no woman that looks like that. It's embellishment. By the way, can I throw something out that I haven't told many people that is, sometimes people ask, what's the current things running through your mind? It's not the Roman Empire. I did that like 10 years ago. That's old news. Real old. The thing to be thinking about now is what has the world forgot to put into the calculation of life? 1 + 1 is 2. Okay, we got that one down. Great. Even big government knows that. 1 plus 1. $1 to the IRS plus $1 to the California tax attorney equals $2. If you make 4, I was in the 52.5% tax bracket. Yay for the U.S. Every $1 million you make, you get $520,000 to the government. And they can't even fix the potholes. I don't know where that money went. Probably to, I won't say to who, I know. But anyway, here's the thing nobody thinks about. And I'm not the person to invent it, but I'm going to popularize it. There was several famous scientists who came up with this term of risk aversion. Humans are risk averse. So we have all these things. You have Myers-Briggs 16 personalities. You know, you're an ENTP, ENFJ, INFJ. Somewhat doesn't help people to find out they're an advocate or something. It's a stupid test that 800 million people have taken. No offense to that company, but the Myers-Briggs test that's okay for dating, but it's subpar. Because we forgot one thing. Do you know there's a possibility the only difference between you and your dad is he was a low risk taker and you're high? I find that to be the most predictive thing. I have a big, I've got phone sales guys who sell for me. I used to teach them this system called the PACE system. You analyze people's personalities, you break them into practical, action, social, or emotional, and you tweak your sales pitch to their personality. Okay? I now have a more advanced system called TENS, threat-based, empathy-based, novelty-based, structure-based. It's more based off hormones. But I'm the first person to introduce, there's no quiz ever made by a human that factors in your risk tolerance. Now I tell my sales guys, fuck reading people. Tell me, all you got to know is 2 things about somebody. Do they actually have any liquid money? Because you can't sell somebody something for $10 if they only have $9 in the bank. Number 2, are they low, medium, or high risk taker? Dude, you can live your whole life. If you're watching me, you want to learn how to read people, and by today, the end of the day, by midnight, be better than 99% of all psychologists, all therapists, all great thinkers when it comes to human behavior. You can just learn one thing, learn to read people. So let me ask you something. Have you ever punched somebody after age 12?
No.
Okay. Bungee jumping.
Definitely not.
Do you do anything scary?
I run a company.
Well, it's the ultimate risk.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Have you ever bet it all on something that could have lost it all?
Yes.
A significant amount?
Yeah, my entire house, every dollar I had in the bank.
Okay. So you're a high risk taker.
Only entrepreneurially.
But that counts. So actually scientists break out fearfulness. So there's a Hexaco score, 25. The most accurate personality test was 25 subfacets, Hexaco. H is for honesty, E is emotionality, X is extroversion, A is agreeableness, C is conscientiousness, O is openness to new experience. They all break down into subfacets. There's about 25 of them. Under emotionality, it actually is very intelligent. It differentiates. A test built in like 1990s. Differentiates between fearfulness, which you have high fearfulness. You don't like going on a motorcycle 100 miles an hour. You don't like, jumping out of a plane. I'm like that too. I don't like physical pain. I do jujitsu. I've done boxing like a lot of my life. I've already been hit. I'm not excited about that. But we have low anxiety. We have ability to take risks. Anxiety.
I have high anxiety.
Yes.
And an ability to take risk. Which is
so just
weird.
so you know, not really. But in your conscious mind, you have anxiety. Mm-hmm. But in your behavior, my friend, an anxious, low-risk taker does not bet their home. Does not bet at all. Could you have lost a lot?
Yes. Here's what's interesting, Tai. So I think you're making a misassessment of the complexity of how people make these decisions. So for instance, hang with me.
Yeah.
The reason that I was willing to bet the house is my sense of identity is not tied up into whether I win or lose a business. So I will have no emotional devastation if I lose that house. So I went to my wife, I got her buy-in. If I lose a house, whatever, it is what it is. But if I don't,
that is a low anxiety behavior, my friend.
Well, tying it to anxiety, I think is going to be misleading because
if I lose everything, I'm good with it. That's not high anxiety.
So here's where this gets complicated. I struggle with anxiety every day of my life. So experientially, being Tom Bilyeu is a constant anxiety management game. Now, I think that my anxiety, though, is born of the body. It's not born of the mind. And so it's diet-based. It's dysfunction in the gut, whatever. And so now you've got experientially, I'm anxious, but temperamentally, I have a high threshold for risk when it matches my frame of reference, which we never close the loop on that. Everybody has a frame of reference. It is the funhouse mirror through which you view the world. And you're going to make decisions based on all the weird distortions that are unique to you. If I thought losing my house or my business failing would make me a loser, then I wouldn't have done it, because if I valued myself based on what other people thought of me and that were true, that's how I would play. I am very much, while I fully acknowledge we are both the shout and the echo. So the shout is what you do. The echo is what people think about what you do. But I'm not swayed a lot by the echo that comes back. It's certainly a factor, but it's not a driving thing for me. But I do have a set of beliefs about what I ought to do. And I, in my belief system, ought to swing for the fences. I ought to leave it all out on the field and play to win. And so that sense of identity and belief set and values led me to say, risking the house, while it is certainly high financial risk, is not a high emotional risk, and I value how I feel about myself when I'm by myself above everything.
Yeah, I would just say the simple way is unconsciously you have low anxiety, and consciously you have high anxiety. You have your mind. People's mind can race, but if you look at their, this is the difference between me and when I go on podcasts, where if you understand this one thing about me, I'm not that interested in. I find people's conscious mind boring. I'm not talking about you. The conscious mind is a very.
You can be bored by my conscious mind.
No, it's not you. I'm not. I wouldn't have come back on your show if I don't find you boring at all. I find you interesting. In general, if you look at my behavior, I think to be a therapist would be torture to me.
Why?
How are you feeling today? How do you feel? That's all. I don't care, because in general, that is just 10% of you, like the iceberg. And so for you, a therapist would be like, you're very high anxiety. A guy like me who cares about what you do, you're very low anxiety. You bet it all and you win. High risk, high reward. So we're kind of talking semantics with each other.
I don't think we are. I think this is where our worldviews collide in a very fascinating way.
Maybe English doesn't have enough words for what, like the Eskimos have 100 words or whatever for snow. I think we don't have enough words in English for anxiety, because there's many types of anxiety.
Maybe around anxiety we don't, but I think we can get to an understanding of where we have a different frame of reference. And because we have different, what I call base assumptions, we're not having the argument at the right level. And so the way that I see it is you have a base assumption that the 50% of you that's hardwired is effectively all you need to pay attention to. And I'm saying,
I agree with you. You should. No, we agree on that. Look, I'm an entrepreneur too. If you don't take action, you will lose. If you only rely on your genes. For example, LeBron James, you meet the guy. I'm friends with one of the Lakers, and he's like, yo, I'm in New York. You want to come out to a club with us? I get there, and I knew somebody was in that room that was special, because they're like frisking me down. I even have my own security. Usually I can come into places, and they're like, oh, we do extra security here. And there's LeBron James. The man's kind of not the same species if you see him. Okay, he's not real. He's a 6'8", 8% body fat. His head's about that big. He's just a big, kind of non-Homo sapien. Okay, Homo sapien supermanus. Okay, that's genes. But if he had eaten Doritos and had no drive and no risk taking, it takes a lot of risk to try to go become a basketball player, he would have been a nobody. So I am not a fatalistic in the sense, and I do think, like quantum physics has shown us, that there is possible free will too. It's a very weird thing. Did you see the new Oppenheimer movie?
no.
So it's probably going to win an Academy Award for multiple things, even though I thought it was only a 7 out of 10. I like the new movie that came out better, the one with DiCaprio, what is it? Adrian Flowers of the Killers of the Flower Moon. That's a better movie with De Niro. But there's a scene that nobody catches. So Oppenheimer, the main character, he comes, and at the beginning, at the end, he talks to Einstein out by a pond for a few minutes. And they finally reveal at the end what Einstein whispered to him. And he said something like this: the man who seeks, who believes in uncertainty comes from me for certainty. So classical physics, the way we used to understand the world, is things were certain. That's why Einstein did not believe in free will. It was certain. You're predestined. It's fatalistic. But quantum theory, which Einstein hated and went to his death kind of fighting, Hawking, came up with like this M theory. There's 1 to the 500 universes in the world, multiverse. When you go to measure things, you change them so you can never measure what's actually happening. String theory, that things are wrapped up so small and that they just appear out of nowhere. Like Hawking talked about that. So Einstein joked in the movie. It's a very intellectual joke that 0 people got in the audience, but I was like, it's like the man who believes in uncertainty comes from me to certainty. What Einstein was saying is we want certainty and we want uncertainty. And what I'm saying is there's a certain certainty to our life that comes from our family. But to feel good, I need to know there's uncertainty that I can fix my damn life that sucks. And I do. And what we now know, and I'm an amateur physicist, not even an amateur, but I listen to the best and I'm good at remembering what people say. There's probably both happening. You want to hear another good quote? This is a crazy. Pull up the book Kon-Tiki. Whoever's ever read, you ever heard the story of Kon-Tiki? Mm-mm. It's one of the great adventure stories. This Norwegian guy wanted to prove that you could go across the Pacific Ocean. Let that stick in a little raft. Oof. And he did it. It may seem at times as if invisible fingers move us about like puppets on a string. But for sure, we are not born to be dragged along. We can reach back and grab the strings ourselves and adjust our course at every crossroads or take off on any little trail into the unknown. That is probably the truth. We are both puppets that are being manipulated by our genes and non-free will. That's classic physics. But yet, quantum physics says we can reach back and say, I don't like the strings and pull back a little bit. That's a great analogy for what I believe.
It's interesting. That spills into whether we're defining free will as deterministic or whether, because you can.
We need to have Sam Harris on here.
Yeah.
Do you have a time machine in your? You have a lot of cool tech things here.
I have cool stuff.
I want to go collect Einstein. Sometimes people argue with me, Tai, you don't need books to become wealthy. You just go and do stuff. And I ask them, do you think it's good to have smart people in your inner circle? Mentors? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Change your social circle, change your income. Okay. Do you think Aristotle was a smart guy? Would it be good for him to be in your inner circle? Hell yeah. He's dead, bitch. You need a book. So I don't really like books. It's just it's a time machine. So I don't know. It would be amazing if we had a council I call it the Council of 12. You need 12 wise people in your life. The president has 15, the cabinet. So you could call it the wise 15. I tell people the second you start making wealth, you find your cabinet. And in that 15 people, you should have both the living and the dead. So you need a lawyer. I got my second student who came from nothing, who I think is going to become a billionaire, who follows me. He's living in Puerto Rico. Various reasons in Puerto Rico. But I told him, where's your family office of 15 wise advisors? He doesn't have them yet. I said, make sure half of them are alive and half of them are dead. And so sometimes to create wealth, you have to imagine, what if Warren Buffett was sitting in this room? What if Rockefeller was sitting in this room? What's the guy, the African wealthiest person, Masu or something, African? Look him up. I always forget I grew up in the damn West. They don't teach you the full story. No, he's dead. Look up richest African in history. So I imagine I have the wisest Asian, mogul in history, and the wise, Musa. They said maybe he was the wealthiest person. If I had all those people in my business, every time I make a decision, you ask both the living, maybe a couple lawyers, accountants, mentors, but you also ask the dead, am I making the right move? And you'd be amazed at that simple mental exercise, which anybody can do, how you start becoming wealthier from that. Instead, people go inward too much. I don't like that movement. All the answers are within and happiness is from within. Well, that's a misleading sentence. Like if I want to learn, let's say I only knew English and I want to learn Spanish. Is all Spanish within me? If I want to live in China, is all Chinese within me and I go inward? No, you actually have to go outward and find another person who speaks Chinese. And the best thing you can do is go live in China, and it rubs off on you, your social circle. So change your social circle, change your living and dead advisors, and you change your bank account forever. People don't like to do it because that's what I was saying. Society's become too much into free will, where I can figure it out myself. No, go back to your ancestors. They were wise. They survived 10,000. We're all the product of 10. I call it the whisper of 10,000 generations. You know, what did your great grandfather do to make it? I don't think we study them enough. I like that religion in the East. They go to they say the Chinese worship their ancestors. I don't know that that's true. They respect their ancestors. You should go visit the gravesite of your grandma and grandpa and great grandparents once a year and contemplate what lessons they had for you. They are you. You are them. It's very interesting. So
it's interesting.
Anyway,
so in a single sentence, I can pinpoint where I think you are going to drive yourself crazy with trying to predict the world.
Might have already happened.
And that is, I think that looking back, I think that the part of you that is malleable, that creates your frame of reference, the frame of reference is so much more important to understand than your genetics. That's my single sentence.
Possible.
And if you spend time trying to learn from your ancestors and all that, I think it will be fascinating, and I think people will enjoy it because there is something about knowing about your past. But I think it is going to be, because even your contemplation of your past will be driven through your frame of reference. And so like when I look at, never did I think I would start talking about sort of global issues or political issues, and yet here I find myself, because when people say that politics is downstream of culture, what they mean is that politics is downstream of frame of reference, and culture is a huge part of what shapes your frame of reference. But it really is just a game of frame of reference. And if you look at the world from the position that all money is evil, power is a dirty word, then when you see somebody that has power, you will naturally assume that they got there through, either intellectual violence or actual physical violence.
Depends on how rich they are. The richest is mostly. My friend once told me, first hyper rich kid that I knew came from nothing. He said, Tai, all empires are built by blood, sweat, and violence. The top Forbes list, the top 10 people, they have killed before. I promise you, they have killed. There's bodies. You ever read the story of Las Vegas, where a lot of money was made in America? There's a lot. That movie, Casino, where Joe Pesci's taking a dude out of a trunk of a car and burying him alive. Wasn't that Pesci, or was that De Niro? It was Pesci, right? Yeah. Oh, that's a true story. I always think it's funny when people admire billionaires. I learn from billionaires. But I'm in business right now with two guys on the Forbes list, and I know many of them. They are warlords. They are warlords. Does that mean that through their own selfishness they can help the world? Yes. I'm still capitalistic in that sense. But
all I want to say is that is your frame of reference playing out. And so you and I look at that. You're going to see what you.
Yeah, but I didn't have that frame till I did business with them. Then I'm like, oh, this man's definitely killed before.
Such is the nature of a frame of reference. It really changes. That's what I'm saying. It's the part of malleability versus the.
But all of life might be a simulation. All our memories might be. I might not have ever done impact theory 4 years ago. It might just be an implanted memory.
I run that thought experiment all the time. It's very helpful. So I'll wrap this segment up with the following statement. Dear anybody at home, you have a frame of reference. It is to you what water is to a fish. You're probably hyper unaware of it, and yet it controls everything about your life. You're going to make decisions. Einstein said that the most important decision anybody will ever make is whether they live in a friendly or a hostile universe. So what he's saying is it's not objectively one way or the other, but you're going to decide, and then you're going to see that decision echoed through everything. So be very thoughtful about what you decide to believe, in this case about money, power, seduction, whatever. All right, speaking of seduction, women. I want to talk about Tai Lopez and women. Okay. One, are you married?
Nope.
Are you going to get married?
Not sure I'm a marrying kind of guy.
Okay. Do you have kids?
Maybe.
Interesting. So out of curiosity, without revealing the yes or no, obviously everybody listening assumes that means yes, but setting that aside, is not answering that purely about safety?
I think some things don't need to be part of the show.
But I would understand.
Not
if-
your show. I'm talking about my
no,
show.
I totally
don't think some
understand.
things don't need to be part of my social media. I think for many reasons. It can be safety. It can also be people should want their kids to grow up in a down-to-earth, grounded place. I lived in Beverly Hills where everybody's parents are famous and the kids are part of the fame. It doesn't end well. I remember, no joke, a kid telling me, I was going for a jog outside my house in Beverly Hills. I'm going, and a guy pulls up. He's like, hey, I'm a follower of yours, and I live on the same street as you. I'm talking, and he was like 16. And he's like, yeah, I've been dealing with a lot of struggles. And his struggle was his parents gave him a BMW, and all of his friends had Ferraris. And I said, I don't want my kid. That's not good for a kid. Talk about distortion of reality. His reality was like, he was kind of like, Tai, I'm trying to make more money. And I'm like, why? And he's like, dude, I don't fit in school. And like, he was kind of misquoting the wealth things. Like he was reading, it's like, I need to change my social circle. I'm dealing with 16-year-olds. Some of my friends only have BMWs, but some kids in school have Ferraris. And those are the real thinkers and Think and Grow Rich. And I want to be like them. And I was like, whoa, when you have kids, don't put them in Beverly Hills. Put them on a farm.
That I actually hear that, but I still don't understand why not admit. And so this comes back to Tate was the first person I saw that was like, I'm not going to answer the question. I think he's since just answered it. I don't know. I don't follow him closely. And then I heard you, same thing, that you don't even want to say one way or the other. Having them grow up on a farm, never telling people how many, who, where, all that I understand. But not wanting to acknowledge whether you have them or don't.
Well, it can also be part of what the mother asked for.
Okay, fair enough.
It's like, so for me, it's also whenever you have kids, you got two sides of the story. So for me, on kids, what I tell people is most people should have kids. A big problem in the world is people who can't support kids are having a lot of them. And the nations and societies that would produce productive citizens are having none. And that is an existential crisis for humanity. Elon Musk says it's the biggest threat is underpopulation. That doesn't mean, you have poor person in a village having 12 kids and all the kids are malnourished. They should have less kids. But there's genetics, for example. We need intelligent people in this world. Okay, not only intelligent, you need other facets, but that's a very genetic thing. And so, you ever seen the movie Idiocracy? What happens if only cuckoo people have kids? Also, mental illness is extremely heritable. Things like schizophrenia, even anxiety. Some of these are off the chart, way more than 50% heritable. Narcissism, MPD, a lot of these are highly heritable, almost as heritable as height. It's a set of genes. There's no one gene, but there's a set of genes. So, we need people who are stable having kids. But now, Karl Marx was right about one thing. As we move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs to the top, and we're all seeking our esoteric expression of ourself, like I said, the artist using their body as a cheese grater in a New York City art, that's the expression. That person, maybe they shouldn't have kids, but we need people at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs also having kids. It's good. It's important.
Okay, give people your best argument. So I'm not having kids. Mm-hmm. You maybe don't have kids. Mm-hmm. Why do you think people should have kids beyond population? Or is that the reason?
Oh, well, look, here's my nihilistic side. I do a lot of private mentoring now. People pay me $100,000 or $1 million to $1 million to talk to me 8 times a year. Some of the biggest influencers you all know, I won't say their names, are in my program. And one of the big ones asked me, Tai, do you ever struggle with nihilism? He's made all the money. He's in his 20s. He made $18.5 million profit so far this year. So make 25 mil. Yeah, at 23, it was a good life. Lives in a zero tax jurisdiction, keeps all of it, adds more money. And so he's now moved up hierarchy of needs. He bought him food, shelter, water, love. You have all this, and safety's next, and then love. And Now he's up at the top and he's becoming nihilistic. He's like, I don't know what I live for, dude. It's like I wake up and it's like I can have almost any woman. He's a good looking guy. I can have any girl I like. So girls aren't that interesting because they seem too easy to get anymore. Blah, 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 blah. And so that, my nihilistic side is, what does anything matter? Okay, so some people say, why do I want to have kids? Okay, and if I give the answer, well, we're kind of programmed to have kids, and in general, we'll be happier and society will turn out better if people who can have healthy kids have healthy kids. And they go, yeah, but it's just like, it's so narcissistic. You're just giving birth to another one of you, and how narcissistic. But I'm like, couldn't I say the inverse? Isn't it narcissistic by definition to not have kids? To focus on myself? I mean, if you want to go nihilistic, nothing, the end in nihilism means nothing matters. So when somebody tries to come on this side and go, why does that matter? And they get nihilistic, I'm like, but by definition, you don't even, why does it matter that I even answer somebody? Why does your mastery matter? Why does it matter if we improve the world? We improve the world so Homo sapiens get better, but 100 million species we've wiped off. The better humans get, oftentimes, not always, we wipe other species off the planet. So you talking about the frame, so your frame, let's say, or somebody with your frame is like, I can improve the world with power, but that's just your Homo sapien world. You might be wiping out a species of beetles. You know, you might be wiping out a species of highly intelligent whales. So I don't know. If we go too far down nihilism, I just come back to like the Amish. They don't have to know why everything is. They just go, because I'm a human. A monkey doesn't have to dissect why he likes bananas. I was in Kuala Lumpur about a month ago, and man, the monkeys get smart. One tricked me. I had a whole stack of them. One monkey comes up to you, and I got it on video, and kind of like, hey, buddy. They don't talk, of course. Another monkey came from behind, took all my damn bananas. So humans, we're 98% the same DNA as chimpanzees. We're 50% the same as bananas. We're 70% the same as flies. So when I get nihilistic and I try to dissect myself and just go, well, honestly, nothing matters. And we're all stardust. And we know at some point we all disappear. We also know we might not even be real. There are many very intelligent people think we might be a smarter version of ourselves. Video games. We are Grand Theft Auto. My friend is one of the main guys who built Grand Theft Auto. Some people used to say my house over there that I used to get a lot of comments, your house is in Grand Theft Auto. And I reached out to him. I'm like, did you put me in Grand Theft Auto? He never would answer. But we are Grand Theft Auto, man. And then it's funny, we play video games, but we might be a video game too. It's like, you know, like when you see yourself in a mirror, there's too many mirrors. It keeps reflecting back and back and goes infinity. That might be us. We might be a video game of a species with a video game that is a video game of a higher species that it never ends. There's also, I was talking to ChatGPT the other day and I was going, you know, sometimes if you look at the world, I'm not a flat earther, but flat earthers have this thing that we're like in a hard dome kind of thing. I'm like, I asked ChatGPT, is it possible that everything we know, we are one atom inside an entire other universe, but we think and ChatGPT has a long-winded answer. But some people think that might be true. We kind of look like that. It's almost like you can go down this. That's why I like a farm. When I'm on a farm, I have a farm where I actually farm with horses. I have 2 farms, 2 organic farms. I have one. Talk about make the world a better place. I buy rundown, chemically abused farmland and I improve it. That's my give back to the world. It's important. And I have a farm that I use tractors, got big John Deeres here, and then about 2 hours away, I have a farm in the middle of an Amish community. And on that farm, I farm with horses. I plow with horses. You ever read the book Flow by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi? You should read that book. Okay. I met him before. He came to my basketball court in Beverly Hills. You know, Flow says the optimal life is like the sailor. Like, you forget what you're thinking about. You just are doing it. Like the sailor is pulling, the wind is blowing, and your boat is flying, and you're like pulling the ropes, but it becomes the unconscious. That's the happiest state of a human. When I'm on my farm and you have these big horses, I have big Belgian horses. Sometimes I'll put 6 of them together and you pull the rein. You're like, giddy up, gee haw, and they pull. It's the most zen thing ever. I'm right there. They're so big that I don't think about, let me check my phone. Because you make one mistake, I've seen people get killed with horses. I saw an Amish guy once get kicked by a big horse in the chest, like a cartoon. He shot through the air. It was insane. I was like a cannon. He got shot out of a cannon. So I'm pulling the horses, and I'm just there in the moment. I'm in flow. And so I think that Freud was right. Like Karl Marx, there's a book. My favorite book is called Civilization and Its Discontents. And so when we think about should we have kids and should we not have kids and what's the purpose and should we change the world or make money, at the end of the day, what's better than all of that is just flow. And it needs to be something primitive that you're doing. Some people feel it by going camping. Some people feel it by hunting. Some people feel it with art or music, I play the piano. Sometimes you get into flow. The more important than all the things we talked about, both you and I like to make money. It's a thing we do. We justify it in various ways, and maybe it's true or maybe it's not, but never get too disconnected from pre-civilization. Civilization has made us unhappy. You know what's funny? When I was listening to you earlier, you said something. I'll try to remember. You said there was 2 poles. There was like the poet. No, there was like the you wanted to be like
Filmmaking
conqueror.
poet.
Yeah, you wanted to win. But yet, society is like, you get married. You ask me about marriage. Marriage is an invention of mankind. Most of your ancestors didn't get married. What do you mean got married? You think they went to a church house 10,000 years ago and went to a judge? There was no governments. People bonded, and people had Homo sapiens are what we call serial monogamists. So there was monogamy 10,000, 200,000 years ago, but we were uncivilized. And what Freud said in literally the most immaculate set of pages I've ever read, and I've read many things, is Civilization's Discontents, the 2nd chapter. And he says it's a trade-off. By becoming civilized, we decrease the chance that your next door neighbor would get envious of your place and you wake up and he hits you overhead with a club and takes this house. So you've increased your safety, but you've done it at the expense of your primitive side. And when you have no primitive in your life, you know what it looks like? It looks like America. 60% obesity, 80% out of shape. We eat too much. We walk too little. We overstimulate our brain too much. We don't fast. We have 24/7 everything we need. We overuse the dopamine parts of our brain. TikTok's the ultimate drug dealer in mankind's history. They're literally drug dealers, and you can see it on machines. Human attention span has dropped to 5 seconds. That's now less than a goldfish. So animals have been less dopamine hijacked than us. All of that civilization. Money is part civilization. There was no money before. You know why there was no wars long ago? There was battles, but there was no wars because there was no civilization with large governments. There was no billionaires before. You know why? Because you didn't have any tools. One man could out-hunt another man by double, but now 10 men on the Forbes list. Look it up. They have more wealth than the bottom 4 billion people in the world. Is that good or bad? I don't think in good or bad, but there's a trade-off. We're a highly civilized world. And one of the things you trade off with civilization is high concentration of wealth, which is great if you know how to make money like you and I do. We get to be in the elite. But the downside of that is there's revolts. There's revolts against the wealthy. And it happens now. Sometimes, I don't know if you ever you ever see someone comment, eat the rich?
Mm-hmm.
Comment on your stuff. Comment on my stuff. We have to think about that. I live in Scandinavia a lot. It has a better what's called Gini index or Gini index. Some people
Gini
pronounce
coefficient.
it. Yeah. It's basically like Philippines is like one of the worst It's the disparity between the ultra wealthy and the ultra poor. I live in Norway is basically like the best, or Copenhagen, Denmark. You have more, and there's a lot of good things to be said about it. And there are billionaires, but so I don't know. I'm you could say I am a bipolar wealthy person in the sense that sometimes I like the civilization, which includes money, but I also like going to the cabin and having the horses.
All right, help me connect that to, because originally I was looking for your best like kids. So why have kids? That was a question that started.
Have kids because you were made to have kids, and that should be a sufficient reason.
Just from a genetic standpoint, you are programmed.
I think I could go way deeper.
And there will be some sort of psychological punishment.
Absolutely.
If you don't.
I read, I don't know if this is true. What I read was in the United States, the class of people experiencing the highest levels of dissatisfaction are women who did not give birth ever in their life between 45 and 55. Because, by age 30, a woman has about 8% of their viable eggs of their life still alive, or still viable, I should say. By age 50, the average woman has 0 viable. Now, men don't experience that level of depression because, like, Al Pacino just had a kid at 70. What? Look up Pacino. He just had I just saw he had, with a 29-year-old, he just had an 83. He's 83? Ooh. 83? So men,
wow.
Some people say, well, why are you picking on women? Well, women are on, nature doesn't give a shit about politics and being woke. Nature just goes, there's the rules, I don't care. And so when I see that, I feel like nature leaves clues. So I'm going, wait a second. Okay. That's a major clue when a whole class of people experience high levels of depression. The way I think about life, super simple, is happiness is your compass. So you want to go north, and when you wake up depressed every day, now there is biological kind of genetic depression, but most people experience environmental depression. It's telling you you're going the wrong direction, damn it. So as a society, if you see a large group of people experiencing depression, you ask, what are they doing? And you go the other way. I don't know why, the Forbes list is better than a Harvard MBA. I once tried to get a Harvard MBA. They were accepting. And then they're like, you don't have an undergrad degree. And I'm like, bitch, I'm like the most Googled person in the world at the time. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're not gonna let me in marketing school? I have kids who follow me from Harvard. They're like, our professors pull up your videos. But Harvard wouldn't let me in because they got a rule. That doesn't make sense. You got to have an undergrad degree. Well, I discovered in my anger that there's a better Harvard MBA. It's called the Forbes list. There's a real-time list. It updates every 10 seconds. And I begin to pull the list up now. Forbes list real time. So you just look there and I start to look for patterns. Like I said, there's a pattern. Women 45 to 55 who could have had children that didn't, extremely high level of depression, if you believe that science. So I go here and I got Elon Musk, I got Bernard Arnault from Louis Vuitton, I got Bezos, Amazon, Ellison, I call him the anonymous billionaire. He built it with software. Buffett, Zuckerberg, Gates, Larry Page. I know the 9th guy, Steve Ballmer. That's the richest guy I know. Look, he's at 110. Wow. Sergey Brin, the Google guys. And I started to go, what do these men all have in common? So if I'm asking myself a question you asked about having kids, all these mofo, for the most part, 80% of them had a lot of kids before age 30. Now, I've posted this online and people go, you don't understand the difference between correlation and causation. I'm like, you don't think I know the difference between causation and correlation? What are you talking about? I not only know about it, but I've spent a decade studying it. I'm not sure that it's just correlated. I think it's causative. When you see things at that level, Elon Musk, how many kids did Elon Musk have before 30? I think he had like 6 kids before he was like 32. And now he's at 11 kids? It doesn't seem to be hurting him. It doesn't seem to. Now, can I prove it's causative that the reason he's the wealthiest man in the world is? Yeah, no, of course not. And nothing is that causative unless you're an idiot. It's not the straight line causation of him, but it certainly didn't hurt him. And so I began to look and I meet a lot of guys, including myself, where we're tricked by the machine. The machine is classroom education and low independent thinking. I believe in the rise of the individual. You must think. And so I believed as an entrepreneur that having kids would distract me from making wealth. but I should have just gone to the Forbes list. It's a free Harvard MBA. Shit, it didn't affect any of these guys. It didn't. By the way, Bill Gates is number 7. Bill Gates is the best moneymaker in modern history. If he hadn't given away, he owed 54% of Microsoft. He gave most of his shares away to charity. He didn't give cash away, he gave shares. If he had held on to them, he'd have $1.2 trillion right now.
Jesus.
Microsoft's about let's pull up the market cap of Microsoft. I think it's 2.4 trillion last time I checked. So anyway, Bill Gates had a ton of kids young. So I can argue this from many dimensions. I can say the most depressed people do the opposite, so I want to do the opposite of them. Are depressed, so I want to do the opposite. I can, if my goal is money, mastery, status, I go, well, all the dudes with money, mastery, status, I can't prove it's causative, but it's certainly correlated. So it's a good bet to make. And I think it's logical. So I kind of gave the reverse engineer way. I gave the kind of overt engineer, but let's take logic for a second. You're a social media influencer. We have followers, right? You got a lot of followers. I got a lot of followers. Isn't that just like children? We have a group of people who ally themselves with us. They follow your Instagram. They follow your stuff. They do things that we do. They listen to us. Isn't that like a father? So, as I told you, nature laughs last. I meet people who go, I'm not going to be a father, yet they're social media. You are a father. You, Tom Bilyeu, are a father. Now, we take this a little further. Wouldn't it be good to have some of those allies blood related to you? Yes, it would be. Because one thing we know is that you're less likely to be betrayed by family. There's 2 longest running institutions in human modern history. One's the military. The Greek army has been running for thousands of years. There's still a Greek army. The second longest running business in the world, you go to France, there's a restaurant that I went to. It's family owned since the 1500s.
Whoa.
So families persist. We don't, do you know how many geniuses were related to each other? Erasmus, Darwin, these people are related, they're cousins. So your will to power that you have, Tom, which is to have a positive effect on the world, to use the tools you have, wealth, reach, followers, will also be very logically and efficiently accomplished with your own children. In fact, pull this crazy thing up. Pull up the woman and man. There's a millionaire. This fascinates me. They had 20 kids this year, blood related. She took 20 eggs. They took 20 eggs out of her. There it is. Mom had 20 babies in 1 year by surrogates, and she spent $67,000, I think, a month on 16 nannies. But the millionaire is actually a very intelligent millionaire. They planned it. So he takes his sperm. She takes her eggs out. They stick it in 20 surrogates. They had 20 kids at the same time. It's actually a very efficient way to have kids. They're going to have 100. I don't know what the dude did to end up in prison. But a lot of people would laugh at this. But let's think logically for a second. Genghis Khan, largest empire ever, is the Mongol Empire. Not the Roman, not the West. The East is understudied because we all went to damn Western schools. So Mongol horde, potentially 1% of the world, he's their grandfather. He's had a tremendous effect. You talk about having an effect. Having social media followers, our followers will unfollow us over one thing. But Genghis Khan, yeah, you could see 8%. Yeah, this one says 0.5% of the world and 8% of Asia, he's their grandfather. I read 7. You want a will to power, my friend.
But so what's your North Star here? I'm trying to anchor myself around why you want people to have kids. So we've got population is good for the population. We've got genetics,
yes,
want you to have kids,
yes,
and therefore you should.
Personal happiness.
Okay, what's the feedback loop of personal happiness?
You mean why is
kids?
personal happiness important? Or why
No,
does it happen?
why? How's it related to kids?
Anytime you do what your genes are built for, you're happier. It's almost the only way you can do it is to hijack it. So, for example, the food system hijacks it. We're happier when we get some salt, a little bit of fat, a little bit of carbs, and a little bit of protein. We're not happy. That's why keto will never take off, because we'll be somewhat unhappy with no easily digestible carbs. Okay, so basically, I'm just saying we need to all get over ourselves and just do what's obvious that we're here for. And I said, I think your will to power, and it's funny, you're high on will to power, which is mastery and mating. Kids will be good for you. You have a good kid, you have good kids. I think maybe things happen for a reason. Maybe I'm not trying to make a persuasive thing, because I don't always think you persuade adults. What I would ask you to do is, first, you're a creative man. Your wife ain't that old. Still can have kids. Think about it. You think Elon Musk has a lot of power? He got 11 kids and keeps popping them out. He had two. He had two in the last 12 months.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Is it possible he knows something me and you don't know? We're not as successful as this guy.
Is it possible he knows something? Of course. I'm sure he knows many things that we don't know. Certainly he knows many things I don't know. I can speak from experience. But I will say that I think it's a very complicated bag. But I'll give now my best argument for why I think people should have kids.
Why don't you give the one why they shouldn't? Because you're not having kids.
I don't think there is, what's the opening line? Every happy family is the same. Every unhappy family is unhappy in their own way. Yes. So I think the default answer should be you should have kids. If you're uncertain, have kids. If you're sure you don't want kids, fair enough.
Well, convictions are greater enemies of the truth than lies.
Yes.
That's Nietzsche for you.
Yeah, so I would say strong convictions loosely held is the way to think about that statement. If you don't have convictions, you won't be able to take action. But if you're unwilling to change your mind,
why not just hypotheses all the time?
Well, cool. I usually speak in hypotheses. So here's my hypothesis on why most people should have kids. Ultimately, all you're trying to do is modulate your neurochemistry. Life is ultimately about how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself, but you are having a biological experience. And if you don't acknowledge that your brain works in a certain way, you will never be able to predict what makes you happy and what doesn't make you happy, and that's a stand-in for fulfillment. Fulfillment is the only emotional state I know that can survive something like grief. So it is the positive mindset that I think people should aim for. Fulfillment has a recipe. That recipe is very simple. You're going to work very hard to gain a set of skills that matter to you for whatever reason, that allow you to uplift yourself and other people. We're a social creature. We need to serve the group. So if you do that, you will have a resilient sense of well-being, that you have lived your life well. So that, just for mental health, is why I think people should head down an evolutionarily prescribed path. Kids are the evolutionary prescribed path. Also, depending on how you're neurologically hardwired, I would say we're also the evolutionarily prescribed path for most people in most situations. Not all, and it does become context dependent, but for most is going to be long-term pair bonding. We are a species that falls right in the middle. You can judge by testicular size of the male. If you look at like
gorillas,
chimps,
have
they're
small,
teeny tiny.
That's because they beat everybody up.
Exactly. So one guy has all the kids. Exactly. So we know that males fall in the middle. So, but we are, like you said, serial monogamy. Okay, so that's my best argument for kids. So people now have heard we're both, I think, pushing people roughly in the same direction. If you don't want to have kids, I don't think anybody should if you don't want to, but you have to compensate for the fact that now nature's easiest path, what your brain is optimized for, you're taking off the table as a way to reach fulfillment. You can still achieve fulfillment without having kids. It just becomes, instead of trying to serve a smaller group, which is easier for people, the unit of the family, you're now trying to serve a larger group, which is society. Now, society will come and go, like social followers. Sometimes they follow you, sometimes they don't. They can turn against you. It is what it is. There's no sense of deep connection. There's a profound hardwiring where my parents could have been evil, and I would still be more interested in them than the next person. It just is what it is. So that's the 4. Against is, if you don't want them, by all means don't, but just make sure that you address fulfillment somehow, or you're going to be profoundly unhappy. Now I want to go back to where we started, which was women. You said that you're not the marrying type. I would love to understand, because you're so thoughtful about, like, well, this is a big part of this is genetics. So when you say you're not the marrying type, is that psychological frame of reference where you've built values and beliefs around it? Or is it, I don't produce enough vasopressin to get the bond that I need?
Enough.
Right.
Both. I think, look, I agree. Where I agree with you is people are different. As I said, FDS, frequency dependent selection. So nature kind of looks, if there's too many people having kids, it wants a few of them to not have kids, kind of thing. So you could have warriors in a tribe that don't mind dying because they don't have kids at home. I'll give you an example. I was reading Nobel Prize winner, Nelson Mandela. He grew up in Africa. It's not Western.
One of my heroes.
Okay. His dad had 5 wives. There was a village, 5 little huts apart from each other. It's funny, when men have more than one wife, don't put them all in one house. A Mormon a girl who grew up with Mormon, she has 38 brothers and sisters in Utah. Whoa. She told me this. She's like, oh, they all fight with each other. But Nelson Mandela grew up in a group where his dad would spend like 1 week in his hut. And he grew up to be a Nobel Prize winner. I think a lot of things that we think in the Western world are prescribed by God, they're not prescribed by God. But now, he didn't have 1,000 women necessarily. Now, if you go to Mubarak the Bloodthirsty, who had the most children that are counted in Morocco, he had roughly 700 boys. They didn't count the girls back then. He's like, I don't give a shit about
Hilarious.
the girls. Yeah, he used to sit on a throne of skulls. Very intimidating. Some people go, I met a guy one time, he's like, Tai, man, I went, these guys called me in for a business meeting to negotiate with me, and they took me in there, and it was a skyscraper, and we're all in suits, and I was all intimidated. I was like, well, at least they didn't have the heads of the men they had killed last week on the, you need to do, can I come in next time? Can you put some skulls under here?
Yeah.
So I can pretend I'm Mubarak Lopez the Bloodthirsty. Anyway, he had 700 sons, but in general, men have not had 1,000 concubines. I mean, they say Solomon in the Bible was supposed to be the wisest man in history. We had a lot of wives. Yeah, 1,000 wives, I think 10,000 concubines or 2,000 or whatever. But in general, it's been more like Nelson Mandela, right? Small, but not Western. Now, there's been many people who just had one male and one female and one set of kids. But I think I try to go, what is society inventing? And I ignore that. And what is society not inventing? I think society's not inventing that people want to have kids. I think that's in my primitive nature. So a simple thing to do is build your life around the primitive. Just control it 20%. So I think if you go 100% primitive, you'll end up dead one way or another.
Well, so from a primitive perspective, though, the reason that I said that some of this is context dependent is, as far as I know in the evolutionary literature, that basically what you end up getting, you get polygamy when you have one man that's capable of taking care of a lot of women. And when you have that, it's because you have a high Gini coefficient. So you have people that have a lot and you have people that have very little. And so the people that have a lot, you're better off being the 5th wife of somebody extraordinarily wealthy than you are being the only wife to somebody who
But
is
that's
very
not
poor.
quite true. There's a lot of stupid books out there. If you go to the people like a Dr. Bust that wrote the textbook for Harvard, I've had, the Yanomamo Indians. They're still a hunter-gatherer tribe. I was talking to Dr. Helen Fisher. She's also, by the way, the chief scientist for Tinder. She has the most data on love of any human in history. She has all the data. She spent time with the Yanomamo. It's not that there's a low, the Gini coefficient is healthy there. It's only in farming societies where one man.
With men that don't have access to women.
No, because some men will take a woman that's been had by another man.
At the same time.
No, after. When the main guy's done with her. It happens all the time. In fact, I was reading an interesting book. There's a book called Why We Love by Dr. Helen Fisher on this subject. She has a story there. There was a woman who had 18 lovers. They would go and sneak off.
Hold on, the math isn't adding up. So if you have a society that's roughly 50-50, and you have one man at any time that has more than one wife, even if only temporarily, there will be periods of time where there are men who simply don't have access to a faithful woman.
Absolutely.
So while I don't know about the Yanomamo tribe well enough, I cannot speak to that.
But that does happen, and that happens in society right now.
Yes, for sure. But
That does
typically
happen.
what you end up getting, so take a culture where it's celebrated that the elite men have 5 wives, whatever. You are going to create the surplus male problem. So you're going to have
But in
guys.
the Yanomomos, there was no marriage. So the alpha might have had Susie, but Susie simultaneously might be bonding with George, the beta.
Okay, so what are the...
It's not so black and white.
Here's the knock-on consequence that appears to me. Again, I don't know anything about this tribe, and so if they are the miraculous
There's other ones,
tribe that's
Hadzas, you can
able-
look at, many. You're confused. So let me just say, hunter-gatherer is 300,000 years ago to about 20,000 years ago. Rise of agriculture, rise of militaries, rise of governments, rise of one man being able to amass large fortunes through better tools, okay? So are we talking, which time are we talking? We still have most of the genes. Are we talking about the 300,000 to the last 20,000?
Well, I think the argument that if I were to lay out each side, mine is it's context dependent. So we need to know the time periods we're talking about. Yours
But we
is that
are
it
these people
doesn't
genetic.
mean-
No, genetically, we're the hunter-gatherers.
Okay, so for you, this is, again, born of genetics. So born of genetics, what's the thesis? Some men will be happy with multiple wives, and other men will just have to deal with the fact that they have no wives.
Frequency-independent selection, there will be lower risk-taker men. They may want more than one woman, but it's a risk to go after more than one woman, both for surplus. If you focus more on one woman, she's less likely to leave you for another alpha men. So men have developed tremendous, now they call it alpha beta. That's a wrong way to think about it. It's more frequency dependent selection. You're going to have some men that are high risk takers. So they're going to go out, try to monopolize 5, 10 women. That takes more risk. Because, for example, when you're with woman number 8, woman number 2's on her own, and women sometimes decide they want a pair bond, and then that alpha man ends up, sometimes alpha men take care of the babies of beta men. They're teaching now that beta men are always taking care of the alpha's child. Bullshit. They don't know any science. That's not how it works. That's why gorillas monopolize with physical power and keep all the women close to them. But that's impossible to do now, and been impossible to do because, as I said, when they studied the Yanomomos, the women go off hunting on their own or gathering, and they have a little rendezvous with a dude, and you see this in chimpanzees. The betas stay friends with the women and often copulate and mate with them. So it's a super complex set of game theory. It'd be better to just imagine there's a world where there's 3 men and 3 women. Okay? So let's say there's, I don't know, who's a good look. There's Leonardo DiCaprio. He's the best looking one. Who's an average looking actor? Adrian. Who's an average looking actor? De Niro. He's not great looking, but he's not horrible. And then you got Danny DeVito. Okay? And you got the same. Now, let's say all 3 women in general seem to be prettier than men. They've been selected for looks. So there's 3, one extra gorgeous woman, one, decently, and one average, okay? So if you're DiCaprio, you're going to try a high risk strategy, okay? So you're high risk, and I'm oversimplifying. So you try the high risk strategy. You seduce the 3. Okay, but you literally generally are not seducing them at the same millisecond. But he has slept with all 3. He's had his chance, but he probably sleeps with them less often because a man can only have sex so many times in a day. Men are constrained much more. Whereas Danny DeVito, he goes, shit, I'm going straight for the most attainable, the least attractive. And he puts all his concentration on her. Now, at one point, since women, there's a great book on this called The Dangerous Passion. It's about jealousy. This somewhat average woman that has Danny DeVito pursuing her, at some point, she sees DiCaprio with the more pretty one. She goes, fuck that. I don't like that. He may leave me for her. And so she settles with DeVito. And now DeVito never cheats. And he has sex with her, copulates many, many times. Many times. Okay, he may end up having the same amount of kids as the high risk strategy. That's why I said we're forgetting risk aversion and we're thinking this is the alpha guy who has a better strategy versus the beta and the sigma and all these stupid things. We should be thinking that nature's smarter than us all. And it doesn't, you know what nature doesn't give us? It doesn't give us free thought. Forget free will for a second. So what nature does is convince DiCaprio that he's doing the right thing. And isn't this so much more fun? You get the women and you just have sex with all of them. And it's telling DeVito to feel high levels of romantic attachment to the one girl, because a slave owner, a slave, who do you think works harder? A slave who knows he's a slave, or a slave who thinks he owns the plantation? DNA is the slave owner, and it's smart. This happened in America after 1865, Emancipation Proclamation. Blacks were given rights back somewhat, but then came a racist president a couple presidencies later, Reconstruction era. And then they let black people build all these beautiful farms. I read a book in South Carolina. They had to develop this whole farmland. And then they switched it back and they took the farmland back. Not through slavery, but through some nasty laws. So those black men who had thought they were free worked harder than when they were slaves. So it was a very kind of heinous thing to do. That's what's happening with DiCaprio here, Danny DeVito, and Robert De Niro. It's making each of them think they're freely acting. And at the end, no one has more offspring than the other. Because if DiCaprio's way always worked, over 10,000 generations, everybody would be born with the DiCaprio strategy. If you study game theory, though, game theory brand, they call it hawks and doves, is it one game theory simulation, or sometimes they have different names. Exploiters, defectors, but hawks and doves. He's a hawk. DiCaprio comes, swoops in. Dove is a very faithful, kind of upfront, honest guy. Danny DeVito, ugly guy, comes and he's like, I love you, and da-da-da. They have the same amount of kids. And that's why, right now, in the 2020s, there's some people that are like DiCaprio's and some people that are like De Niro's, and De Niro's a little bit. Maybe he slept with 2 of the women out of the 3. But they all have the same amount of kids. That's the game theory weirdo thing. It's like this. I just read today, I was reading a textbook by this guy, Ashton, on personalities. It's fascinating. Men and women, one big difference is men experience this life satisfaction. Women touch the top one day and the bottom the other day. Women go way up emotionally, feeling amazing, and women feel tremendously depressed in the same week. The average man, partially because of testosterone, is comparatively very. But you know what they found? In the totality, male and female, it's not predictive who's having more life satisfaction, because the women's extremes cancel each other out and they're just like the men. That's why I said these 3 guys, DiCaprio, De Niro, and Danny DeVito, their strategies cancel each other out. So what you have to know, going back to your question to me, is who really are you in your primitive state? There are men who have my best friend, I remember being 16 years old, my friend Jeremy. We were walking to the park in San Diego, I'll never forget. And he literally goes to me, he goes, Tai, I just want to find one woman. It was such a funny talk. I don't know why I remember this. I just want to find one woman, and I'm going to give her roses, and we're going to get married and have kids. And I remember at this park, there was all these pretty girls. I was in high school. There's all these high school girls, and we're sitting there, 2 high schoolers, and I go, why? I was like, how are you going to choose? I remember being like, how are you going to choose? Well, guess what? Life passed. We went down. He married as a virgin his high school sweetheart. They were both virgins when they got married. They stayed together 10 years, okay? Had 1 child. He gets divorced. I lived in that house next door to you. No kidding. He calls me. I'm suicidal, man. And I talked to him. It was one of those, I don't think he's joking, suicidal. I said, you got to move. He was living on the East Coast. I said, you move into my house right here. I'm afraid for you. We've been friends since 2 years old. He moves here. He lands. I'll never forget. He goes, Tai, I am going to live the bachelor life like you've been living. He goes, never will I get married. Nah, all this is so funny. So I had a blind date with a Brazilian girl. Literally within a couple days of him landing at the house. This guy landed, he stayed single 3 days. I'm down at, Sushiya down on the bottom here. So I used to go to Sushiya a lot. I love it. It's like an outdoor sushi place right at the bottom of this hill. Sunset Plaza. I'm sitting there. It was a blind date. I don't know. Somebody set her up. They're like, you're going to love this Brazilian girl. She pulls up in an Uber. When the door opens, I look at her. I know she's not my type. I have a type. So I was like, I'm going to instantly pivot this So I'm not stuck with this girl that I don't want. I'm like, I'm gonna go find somebody else. And Jeremy was having dinner with me on sushi. And so I just played almost like a magic trick. She didn't speak perfect English. I just pretended Jeremy was the blind date. And I'm like the fucking valet or something. I was like, well, great, come to our table. And I sat them down. I kid you not. He told me a few years ago, from that night, they never spent a night apart for 8 years. The man couldn't be a player. He couldn't be a bachelor. You know why they broke up, by the way? She got jealous. I'm sure it was other things, but the final straw where he broke up with her, he had, navigation, you can change the voices to Darth Vader, to Luke Skywalker. He said it to a sexy girl, and she finally flipped out. And she's like, am I not enough for you, that you need this beautiful woman? He's like, it's a voice. And he's like, no more Latin women. But anyway, you ever met a dude who never can be single? So he was talking to a girl who worked for me. He overlapped, made sure he had the new girl, dropped the old one, had the new one. Continuous line of monogamy. Got married recently. Wendy told me he never would again. I could have predicted that. I look at his hand, his exactly opposite of me. Crazy high estrogen finger and low. So my point is, know if you're Jeremy or know if you're Tai. Then you'll be in flow. I've tried to be Jeremy before. I make the girl miserable and I'm miserable.
Know thyself.
Yeah, how's that a win? Everybody loses, man. Now, I think what's going wrong in society is people are listening to influencers who are more that want to have 50 women, and they're thinking that's the path, but that's not true. Lots of men. In fact, Dr. Buss told me like 50, 60% of men experience tremendous pleasure from marriage. They feel less anxious. They have more sex. They feel happy. And yes, they may be tempted by other women, but not really. But don't ever forget FDS, frequency dependent selection. 20% of men are miserable and have been miserable. I mean, a lot of men, when women say men are workaholics, no, those are the 20% of men that don't like the fact that they're married. They want to be off. Dr. Helen Fisher, she told me she went to a tribe in like Indonesia, one of these like, kind of like the Yanomamo in South America. And she got there and a man, the chief tribe guy, had 5 wives. And she shows up and she said, I asked him a question. It's in the opening of her book. I think it's in Why We Love. She says to him, I'm a researcher. This is a question I've always wanted to ask. If you had unlimited resources as a hunter, how many wives would you like? She thought he was going to say 20, 30. He said 0. They're driving me crazy. That might have been a man. That was a Jeremy. But because of the tribal status, he had to be, he had to be a player. He wasn't a player.
I have a feeling that's a Tai who realizes that women may not be as easily predisposed to the setup, which is my next question. So
you mean, do I want the 5 wives?
Well, what I'm saying is, so if we know that you're what you called a player, somebody who likes high variety.
Yeah.
You said at the beginning of this that Nelson Mandela's dad had 5 wives, but they all stayed in their own huts. Don't keep them together because they fight a lot. So that would be my instinct, they're not going to mesh well as a general rule. I'm sure there are exceptions to the rule, but that's not going to work well. So how do you find women that suit your lifestyle? You're good at reading people. What's the criteria that you sift through so that you don't end up with somebody who belongs with Jeremy and tries to make it work with you and is unhappy?
By the way, Rick, I realized I said Jeremy's name. Usually I don't say Jeremy's. Jeremy's going to listen.
We can bleep that out if we need to.
No, you can leave it in. He's cool. He'll be like, it's been long enough. It's been long enough, You can now tell Abraham Lincoln gunshot jokes. It's been long enough. It's not too early. Repeat the question.
How do you, what filtering?
No. What how do you find that? Okay, I got an answer you're not going to like, because we talked about astrology at the beginning. My mom's a hippie sitting over there in a chair. The one thing I've learned is there is a 10% chance, maybe higher, that all the religious things that supposedly smart guys like me and you believe is wrong, and all the religious stuff is right. I mean, there is a chance that classical kind of God, there's a God and there's angel. There is some of the smartest people. The first time I ever saw it is the last page of Stephen Hawking's book. Is it his book called The Big Questions or whatever? He has 2 books, Brief History of Time, and one of them he ends by saying, "And then we will know the mind of God." And I was like, what? He's talking about God. Now, he didn't mean it in a religious sense, but there's things like prayer. When you start thinking about quantum physics, like prayer is like there was nothing and then there was something. Or as Stephen Hawking said, we used to think there's no free lunch. It seems like all of the universe is free lunch, as if all of the universe could have been a prayer. That one species said, I manifest a cool group of weirdos, 4 billion of them, and the Big Bang happened. We call it the Big Bang, but that could have been the creation story. We don't know. So, you ask me, do I believe in astrology? I mean, I wouldn't build my whole life around it, but I also don't think it's a 0%. Do I believe in psychics? In general, I wouldn't, but I wouldn't bet 100. I wouldn't bet my life on it. So I asked a psychic this. I don't seem to be the Marion type. Now, there are some psychics, I'm going to tell you, believe it or not, there's a psychic down in West Hollywood. Don't count. I don't know what they do. They're like magicians. I still haven't figured out their trick. There's a famous one that is a psychic to a lot of the smartest, wealthiest people here. I always saw her Ferrari in her house. It's in West Hollywood down by Melrose. One time I was dating this girl and she was like crying after work. She had this big blow up, quit her job. And we were driving by it and I knew she was a hippie. So I said, let's go to the psychic there. So we're going to the psychic. We walk in. She's like true. She's like Romanian. She speaks that. She's got beats, but she has Ferrari, like 4 Ferraris out front. I'm like, this chick is good. I got to see her sales technique. So we walk in. It's a long table. It's very much like a movie. The girl I'm sitting with and this psychic speaking in her Romanian voice goes, or maybe she was Albanian or something. She talks to the woman. She goes, you're having problems at work. Your boss is hitting on you and you're thinking of leaving the job. Well, that's why we drove there. Her boss had hit on her and she decided to quit. Now, this was like a very pretty model. And I was thinking, that's easy. I could have guessed that. Like, I was like a pretty girl having problems with her boss. But I kid you not, the Romanian lady goes, but tonight's not about you, ma'am. It's about you. She turns to me. She goes, you have 6 brothers. Well, I have 6 brothers and nobody knows that. They're all half brothers. After I was like looking for cameras. I was like, look, I still don't know how she figured that out. You can Google Tai Lopez, how many brothers? There's nothing. I don't know how she knew me. But she proceeded to tell me all this stuff. And then at the end, she said, no charge. I came with like a Rolls Royce. She knew I had money. She goes, no charge to you. Take this necklace. This will give you good luck. She tried to put it around me. She goes, and if you ever want to come back, I'm open anytime. It's $1,500 a session. I never went back though because she freaked me out. But I was like, what a damn good salesman. A pure virtue signal. Tai just did this for free. I still haven't figured out the damn magic trick. See? Tai, that one says Tai has 3 half brothers. I have 6. Anyway, so I asked, not that psychic, but a psychic, what should I do? How do I find women like this? You know what her answer was? She pulls her tarot cards. She goes, oh, you just need like kind of a hippie, free spirit woman. There's 20% of the world like that. That's damn good advice. So if you're like me, there's a group of women. First off, there's a group of women that experience no jealousy. It's very rare. It's for sure sub 5 to 10%. There's a group of women who like the thought that a guy can have more than women, then they're just not threatened. So you have to find on a spectrum, you need low jealousy and actually high cooperation. That's technical terms agreeableness. So a high agreeable person just kind of says, well, if that makes you happy, I'm good with it. But it has to be a combination of those two. So a psychic would just say, find a free spirit. The scientist in me was, you need to look for a very narrow set of people. But I think people try to do it my way. I actually like relationships more than I thought. I think I'm more visual. Remember how I said on the spectrum of personality, we've been forgetting about risk taking? Their aesthetics there are men who, I have a brother who's very good looking. I have a couple brothers that are good looking. They don't care that much about the looks of a woman. Interestingly enough, in a textbook, there's an interesting textbook. I think it's Evolutionary Psychology by Dr. Buss. High parasite load societies care more about physical aesthetics, meaning there's actually a gene, because when physical beauty is like low mutation parasite load. That's like the average. I think the average person has like 400 or 500 mutations in the womb from the environment or bad genetics. Not enough that you're handicapped when you're born, but somebody like Brad Pitt had like 50 mutations. And some mutations come from high parasite load. There's huge parts of Puerto Rico, Rockefeller, that was one of his big things. There was so much parasite load in tropical places. So maybe my ancestry from a tropical place has made me more aesthetic. My dad was a pro bodybuilder. He was very aesthetic. So I think what makes it harder for me is, some of my brothers they don't care about aesthetics. They don't want an ugly woman, but they're not tremendously aesthetically picky. They want a pretty woman, but not a shockingly pretty woman. And
what does that have to do with how much you discovering you like relationships more than you thought?
So I have to go. I have a thing called 13 Thesis. It's my 13 hypothesis. For me, there's a certain look that I like more. And so if I go to places that are thick market of that, which is Scandinavia, you ever heard of MED, minimum effective dose?
Probably.
It's when you go to a doctor for antibiotics. He's like, make sure you take all 4 pills. Because if you take 3, nothing happens. Except maybe you get, resistance. So for me, to be in a relationship with a girl, there's a minimum attraction I have to have. Mm-hmm. When I lived in California, in that house, in general, I don't like the look of women in the United States. I don't know why. First time I ever went to Scandinavia, I remember I've told my mom many times, Mom, there's only one thing I'm mad at you for in my childhood, that you didn't move to Sweden when I was a baby. Because every single woman is kind of, not every single woman, but it's a thick market, so it's easier for me to fall in love. So I actually think I'm more romantic than I thought I was 5 years ago. But if I don't have
You just hadn't found the right
No,
type.
the MED. There's not enough MED. And so 2 things a man has to have. All men care about aesthetics. So for me, let's say the MED is she has to be an 8 out of 10 of attraction. But my type. Okay? There's a lot. I don't think Angelina Jolie's classically beautiful. She's like a 4 to me. I don't find her attractive. So there has to be an attraction, aesthetic attraction. For me, let's say every man needs an 8. It's harder for me to fulfill an 8. But you also need a woman within the same or 1 standard deviation of your IQ. That's classic evolutionary theory. So for any man listening or woman, the higher your IQ is, any woman or man listening has high IQ and has high aesthetics, you narrow the pool teeny. I had a mathematician friend, Klaus Flock, astrophysicist at North Carolina. I fed in all my computations that I wanted, and he's like, Tai, we had breakfast in Chapel Hill one time. He's like, I calculate there's 70 women like this in the world. And I was like, but there's 8 billion people. And he's like, and there's none in North Carolina statistically, because there's only 11 million people in North Carolina, and there's 8 billion people. He did all the math. He's like, you're fucked. But what he should have told me is, go to Sweden. That is the simple. That is, I need a shirt.
All right, so we know we need
to... So know thyself.
Yeah, know thyself. We need to go to a thick market. Then we're also going to have...
And then I'm more romantic. Then I am not as interested in dating 20 women.
Only 5?
It doesn't have to be 5. No, I think even the man that thinks he's a player, if the MED is met, he might settle down.
Interesting. That feels diametrically opposed to where we started.
It's like quantum physics. We have our absolute rule that men are genetically, and then we have our quantum physics that the second you start to measure it too close, it changes. That's why I said be careful of convictions. Convictions are greater enemies of the... You know my first YouTube video? If I might digress? It was a good one. I don't even know if I have it posted. I was in a taxi in London. I think it's roughly 2014. The first time I tried to be an influencer. I had some videos in 2009 at the Laugh Factory down there with Zach. 2014, I did this video and I said, the root of all evil. And I said, I can't explain it in words, so let me just give it to you in primitive grunts. The root of all evil in the world is instead of, You know, people ask me what I think of the Middle East right now. The root of all evil is, we know what's true, versus, that's not what I thought, but tell me why you think that way. What's the root of all evil in Russia, Ukraine? You got two sides. Now, I know nothing about it, but I know the root of all evil is convictions. You should have very few convictions because almost everything is wrong, including what I believe. So as I said, when I'm in my best, when I'm in my power, I might have had a hypothesis about myself because when I lived in LA, all the evidence was showing that I didn't want to commit to a girl. But I realized it's because they didn't meet the MED of the two things that are important to my brain. Los Angeles is not an intellectual place. It's a SSG, a self-selected group of people who in general are higher on narcissism. So you do get a lot of people that are beautiful here. But the US is not an SSG for intelligence. There are obviously the most Nobel Prizes in the world are the US, but it's very thin pockets. In general, Europe is more an intellectual place. Even Napoleon in the 1800s said, America, that merchant state. He saw America as a place where people like to make money. So I always tell people, best place you can live is outside of the US for lifestyle. Best place to make money is inside the US. That's why I pop in and out of both. Europe is a much better lifestyle. People are healthier, happier, and you can meet the most beautiful woman who is smart as hell. In America, it's a thin market. You find beauty, and now people are going to get mad at this, but shit, you ever landed at an American airport after being in Sweden? You're like, what the fuck happened? This was a nuclear bomb of looks. What the fuck happened? Now, part of that is obesity, is just decimating looks. Men are always like, Tai, I'm too ugly to get a girl. I'm like, nah, you probably got too much fat on your face, damn it. Shit, fat distorts the face for men and women. And everybody distorts in a different way. So Europe, like Sweden, is I think last I read, is the most in shape people in the world.
What's the secret to being able to get the kind of woman that you want?
Change where you live, damn it. Geography is a son of a bitch. You get the wrong geography. I have a friend. He freaking loves brunettes, and he lives in he lives in Norway. I'm like, bro, you gotta move. Go find a wife in Brazil and come back. Now, one thing I would add to this, the new global study came out. I've been waiting for this for my entire decade. Men and women go hard on studying mental instability because countries aren't all the same. What do you think's this new meta study came out? What's the most mentally unstable place in the world?
Mentally unstable?
Yeah.
Russia.
High. It's like, say, 3. Eastern Europe is very high in and when people say, what do you mean by mental instability? Dark triad exploitative traits. So dark triad traits, there's dark dyad, but dark triad is narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Where else do you think's even worse?
That was my best guess. I'm
Where
just going to go through
Where could you hide a terrorist for 20 years?
Middle East, but you'd have to be very specific in which country, and I would not be the person to make that guess. Am I right?
You ever seen Donald Trump's interview where he goes, Abu is dead. He died like a dog. You ever see that whole thing? No. Remember when Obama sent a Navy SEAL team in and the helicopter? That was Pakistan. That was Osama bin Laden was chill there. Like, we'll take this. So Pakistan scored on this meta study. By the way, no offense, I have actually an office in Pakistan. So I've had a great experience in Pakistan, but...
Which is currently being bombed.
Yeah.
After that comment.
My office?
I'm kidding.
Okay, I hope not.
It's like, what?
I need my office. No, but Pakistan, Middle East in general, Eastern Europe, France is the most unstable in the Western world. But where do you think's the most mentally stable place? A thick market of low exploitative traits.
Brazil.
You got it. You're the first person to ever get it.
Come on.
I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I'm like, I got these big, huge guys I work out. Higa Machado, he's like 6'3", 260 pound, 260 pound red coral belt. He's the jolliest guy ever. Now, Brazil has high crime, but lower exploitation. It's a very family-oriented place. So if a man is looking for long-term mating, You need to have your MED for looks and intelligence, but you need to heavily weight mental stability because that shit passes on to your children. So this is a complicated game. In my brain is more, I'm not anxious, but I try to play chess with things when society taught me how to play checkers. This is a complicated question. That's part of why I came, I've been off social media for 3 years. My life mission, Joel Salatin says, the most important thing you do is create a 1-sentence mission plan that you write down. So make sure your mission plan's bigger than your own lifetime, that needs to be fulfilled. Mine was, starting about more than 10 years ago, was I want to spread good ideas, okay? Or good hypothesis, we could say. And I came back to social media because social media is actually spreading very bad ideas. And the worst idea is one that's 95% true and 5% wrong. Because it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. So I think this is a subject. I think men are getting led astray on this. A lot of dudes are like just following.
What's this? To only one woman, get married.
No, the other way. It swung the other way. Never get married, never have kids.
You think that's the mistake?
Yeah. Most men aren't built for that.
So should men, we obviously already covered kids. Should most men get married?
I think you should have long-term mating. I don't think marriage matters. If you want to do it for tax reasons. Sweden has lower divorce rates than America. Nobody gets married. They haven't been getting married for 50 years. Iceland, very cool society. I was just there. Long-lived society, been going functional for 1,000 years. Nobody gets married there, but they'll stay together. I mean, they'll have 6 kids and live together for 20 years. You ask them why they're not married, they're like, who cares? It's a government piece of paper. They're Vikings.
Do they have a religious tradition in Iceland?
They're half Vikings, they call them, or in Iceland they say Vikingang or something. Vikingang. It's supposedly Christian, but it's very Viking. Scandinavia. It's a lot to learn from Scandinavia. Scandinavia is one of the pockets of the world that's an outlier. It's not really capitalistic like America. It's not really communistic like Russia. It's not really socialistic or individual, yet it has individualism. You know what they do right? People aren't physically healthy anymore in America. The food system is the biggest scam. People are always going, the crypto people did a scam or this. I'm like, what are you talking about? If everybody was logical, you'd be throwing the CEO for the last 50 years of every large food company in prison for poisoning a generation. Literally poisoning a generation. People sometimes go, Tyler, your course is a scam. I'm like, I had a class that was $67 for 67 hours of business training. That was like repeated in Harvard. Even if you thought it was a bad program, you only spent $67. My brother spent $80,000 at UNC to get a Spanish degree, and he doesn't even know Spanish. And he was $80,000 in debt. It almost sunk him. He was very depressed over it for a long time. How's that? Those people not in prison. You're going to talk about a scam. So one of the things that's going on, everybody wants to make more money. Everybody wants to have love, right? But at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is your body. I even heard you at the beginning. People think I don't listen. I listen. You said, well, the only thing more important to me and my wife would be my physical health. I wouldn't trade that. Which, by the way, you're 100% of your own genes and you're 0% of your own wife. So that's a predictable answer we would all make. If you had a choice between being super unhealthy and being celibate, or super healthy and celibate, or super unhealthy and have love, you probably would pick healthy. We don't talk enough about health. Entrepreneurs, I just wrote this book, shameless plug. It's like $7, called The 3 Trends. At the end, even in a business book, it's about how to create wealth from social media. In the damn end of it, I put in a bonus chapter called The Ideal Physical Daily Routine. That includes a lot of stuff about health. For example, you really, as a man, we know this. You should be walking 15,000 steps a day. When you open your damn health app and you look at the average for the month, I think health they give you, it needs to say 15,000, and women are built to walk around 12,000. There's a great book on this by Daniel Lieberman from Harvard. He's a paleoanthropologist. He checks the bone structure of our hips. He can tell, and look at the archaeological record. Men hunted about 7 miles, but we didn't do the type, get off the damn treadmill at the desk. I use at the gym. I use a treadmill desk in the office because you don't want to be, hardcore working out. but we're built to sprint, run, jog, slide, and jump. So even when we do cardio, our 15,000 steps, we're not even doing it right. We're walking on concrete, walking on a flat surface, so it increases things like joint damage, or we're jogging. People who jog always look horrible and age faster than anybody else. I know, piss off the whole marathon. Well, great. If you want to do a marathon, but you don't look good. But humans are, when we were hunting something, we sprinted sometimes. You had to jump over things sometimes. You had to slide to the side. You had to run backwards sometimes. You had to stop and walk and recuperate, and you had to high speed sprint. So we don't even know what we're doing. Sometimes people go, Tai, are you a physical therapist? What's your credentials? I'm like, people with credentials failed us. Nobody even knows how to work out correctly. So I built this thing called 150 body around the number 150. Theoretically, scientists thinks we can live to 150 years old. That's the current. Now, some people say you can live Methuselah, but if you ask the largest group of scientists, they'll say we can live to 150 and be somewhat thriving. Well, you need 150 minutes of deep sleep every night to do that. Who the hell? I track on a ring. You have to change your life to get 150 minutes of deep sleep. That's 2.5 hours. I got all these entrepreneurs around me. I got a guy, multimillionaire, 8-figure guy, 9-figure guy. He gets 60 minutes of deep sleep. I'm like, what are you doing, bro? Do you know Maslow? What you're talking about this, and I'm going to change the world, and I'm going to this and my kids. I said, you're going to fucking die. What are you talking about? So people should stick much closer to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs and never think you can move off the bottom of it. Get on a farm. You should drink dairy. People are idiots with dairy. They're literal idiots with dairy. There's not one piece of science. Now, there are people who are lactose intolerant, but dairy is the food of the gods. And if you don't believe me, all the NFL and the NBA, you notice there's one group of people that seems to be playing well, black guys. Well, they don't come from every tribe. You think they come from the pygmy tribes of South Africa, the southern part of Africa? No. A lot of the damn huge, most athletic, powerful people, they're Maasai and they're Dinka. What do the Maasai do? They live off cattle. They drink the blood right out of the neck. They drink the milk and they eat the meat. So we've been led astray by the machine. The rise of corporations tricked us that dairy's bad for you. Now, if you have lactose intolerance, you can do other things. And you don't need a lot of dairy. That's the thing. People think, oh, you drink 50 gallons of milk. No. But paleo is not correct. Carnivore is not correct. Keto is not correct. It's all there. It's the nomadic diet. Look it up. There's 3 branches of human history. There's the branch of hunter-gatherers, and then there's a branch of agriculture. Both of these don't have the best health. So we base paleo and carnivore. Carnivore is kind of its own invention, but humans are not carnivores. I'm like, it's funny. I have cows. So when I meet a vegan, I'm like, you ever been around an herbivore? Oh, no, a vegan is the way. It's healthier for you. You ever been around an herbivore? I have 300 herbivores on my farm right now. Cows. 4-chambered stomachs. They have no teeth at the top. None. If you have teeth, you're automatically chewing, not forage. You don't have grass. Now, carnivores, I'm like, how many carnivore teeth do you see in your mouth? Ding dong. You got a couple sharp ones. You ever opened your carnivore dog's mouth or a lion's mouth? It's a lot of sharp ones. So we got confused. Hunter-gatherer, we're not the healthiest people. A lot of them, like I said, pygmies. They're like 4 foot tall. They're not that strong. Then you had modern agriculture, which was we basically have domesticated plants too much. My wild apples on my farm are that big. How much insulin response? What do you think is the sugar content? The glycemic index of an apple this big. Much? I go in the store, I'm like, this person is poisoning a civilization with an apple that big or grapes that big. But that's the nomads are the branch you should be following. They are who was the healthiest people in North America? George Carlin, not the comedian, the painter in the 1700s, came through America, studied all the people. When he came to the Plains Indians who lived off buffalo, also they would shoot the babies, cut open their stomach and eat basically the cottage cheese, the curdled milk out. Okay? They ate the organ meat. Who was 6'1" tall, strongest, smartest, blew him away? It was the Plains Indians, not the ones who farmed. There was the tribes that ate basically just vegetables. That was the Ute Indians in Utah. They were the poorest. They looked like they were going to die all the time. We have to become an independent thinker.
Yeah, I saw a quote from you that said, I don't know what to make of a civilization that poisons its own people.
Their own children. Go into a school right now. You got Coca-Cola for 6-year-olds. Even the government stupid nutritional thing says you should get 20, if an adult should only get 25 grams of processed sugar. Some Sprites I've seen a Sprite that had, I don't know what size it was, it had 60 grams of sugar. And you give it to a kid who's 35 pounds, and then you give them Ritalin. So the other people, some of them should be in prison, not all of them, is the pharmaceutical people.
All right, we've opened up 2 big cans of whoop ass, but I know we have to wrap and get you out of here.
Yeah, what time is
This
it?
has been fascinating.
We should talk business.
Let's do it.
We didn't talk as much business. That's good, though.
Well, so one question I have on that is obviously over the last few years when you've been out of the spotlight on social doing the traditional marketing, you've gone into bigger companies, older companies, bought Radio Shack, bodybuilding.com.
Pier 1.
I heard you, Pier 1, Jesus. I heard you say that your holding company was going to do about $450 million in revenue. How's that going? Like, what's the strategy there? Where do you see this ending up?
So I've always been a Warren Buffett guy. And I think when you create wealth by reverse engineering the best, right? Now, who exactly is, I actually think Warren Buffett, and I think the 2 best business people, just pure business people, are Mark Zuckerberg and Warren Buffett. Elon Musk is probably the most innovative and creative, and maybe civilization changing. So what Warren Buffett said is, or how I interpret it is, don't build it if you can buy it. But if you can't buy it, build it. And so I think an underutilized tool, I bought my first business, did an M&A transaction in like 2004. I took over a nightclub business. And it instantly started making money. Now, that doesn't always happen. M&A deals, if you start doing a lot of M&A deals, some are going to succeed and some will fail. Even Warren Buffett kicks some out. I'm not as good a businessman as Warren Buffett, but everybody, when you acquire companies, sometimes some win and some don't. But the advantage is you buy a company like Pier 1 and you have 95% brand recognition in the United States. And so if you want to be in the home goods, you want to sell chairs, you want to sell furniture, to build that from scratch might take 65 years and a couple $1 billion in revenue. You can buy it. So I think more entrepreneurs should be buying shit. I think it's a big mistake. And if you go back to that Forbes list of the top 10 wealthiest people, look, Elon Musk his first big wealth was created with PayPal. He didn't start PayPal. He merged into it in an M&A deal. He didn't start Tesla. He bought in, I think he put in $32 million to acquire his stake.
Yes, but you're taking what looks like from the outside to be a very high risk strategy. So when you announced that you were buying Radio Shack, I was like, whoa. Because that, from a brand perspective,
well, not everybody
like
should do that kind of. Look, risk taking, again, know thyself. If you're a low risk taker, a simple thing to do is buy cash flowing businesses. I had a friend, Nate, in San Diego. I remember him telling me, Tai, I bought, and I did this in 2013. He bought a fence building business, a boring business, literally built fences from a guy in Orange County who was like 70 years old, had no kids that wanted the business, was doing $5 million a year. My friend bought it for no cash. He just said, I'll give you $50,000 a month. He funded the $50,000 a month to pay the guy by doing email marketing and adding an extra $100,000 in profit a month. So it was a riskless transition. I did that in 2013. I bought a online education company. 2 partners were fighting. It was in the house right there next to you. And so it wasn't risky like buying a big brand. That's all. You can just buy something that's cash flowing that's like 40 years old. And and I did that. I bought a business and I introduced email marketing to it, and I made an extra $200,000 the first month. And my payments were $10,000 a month on it. So I kicked myself out. I owned half of it, 100 G's, and paid 10,000 of it to the guy. So I think this risk tolerance thing, next time I come on, I'm going to have thought. This is my newest thing I've been thinking about the last 6 months. But don't dismiss something because you're a lower risk taker. And I've done this before. Take a good idea and stick it in your risk profile. So if I see, for example, Elon Musk did the riskiest of all M&A. He bought Twitter for $44 billion from a public co to private. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. He borrowed money. I think he put in, I don't know, $8 billion of his own. It's all leveraged up. After 3 months of him owning, he said, we might go bankrupt. If it goes bankrupt, he has to give most of his equity back to restructure the business in a Chapter 11. So Elon Musk is tremendous high risk. For one of the first times I ever met Elon Musk, he told me his story, and he said, after PayPal, I think he made, I forget the number, 130 million after taxes. He said, I heard him say, in person, I was borrowing rent money 10 years later or 5 years later. So he's so high on the risk profile that if somebody listening says, well, Elon Musk is buying crazy companies and dumping his whole life, say, if you're not able to take that level of risk, you might commit suicide. Many a man has committed suicide from not knowing his personal risk profile. Elon Musk has a superpower. Donald Trump the same way. In his book, one of his books, I've never met Donald Trump, but he said in one of his books, he said, you know what? I'm just built different. He said, at one point, I walked by a homeless guy and I was 1.2 billion in debt that I had personally guaranteed. And I thought, that homeless guy is higher net worth 1.2 billion richer than me. And he said, I could sleep 8 hours every night. And he said he had a friend who was a college professor who had a $250,000 mortgage. And he said he used to call, Donald, I can't sleep at night. I got to make my payment. It's $4,000 a month. And Donald said he couldn't understand it. I think I understand it now when you begin to apply the risk profile. So people shouldn't look at what I do. You should look at the general vicinity. Acquire businesses is a great idea. But I'll tell you, I'll close with this. This new book I wrote, The 3 Trends, what most people should do is catch the third trend, which is the rise of the individual. And the simplest way for every risk profile, whether you're low, medium, or high, is to learn how to create wealth from social media. If you can create wealth from social media, you will win. Because think of it this way. One, you could first off do like what Ben Shapiro did. He built a personal brand around himself, but he diversified. Because some people say, I don't want to build a brand on myself. What if I get in a car accident? He then developed a guy named Jordan Peterson who wasn't well known. So, and they have a JV, he's a profit share with each other. So what you do is you build your brand, or if you're too shy, you do a joint venture with another brand, run the operations. It's a portable business. When you build true fans, some fans leave you, but humans are commitment, consistency, bias. Once they really love you, I heard a fan of Donald Trump, the left was interviewing his fan and said, is there anything Donald Trump could do that you wouldn't support him for the next president? And the guy goes, bro, there could be film of him murdering somebody. He's like, I just like Donald Trump. So a personal brand, a corporation could never do that. The rise of the McDonald's, the IBMs, they're going to fall. The Microsofts one day will fall. Even Apple's, they'll be replaced by what Elon Musk is doing, sticking his face as the face of Twitter. So become an individual brand, diversify by joint venturing with 3 or 4 others, know thy risk tolerance. If you are a little bit lower on the risk tolerance, don't try to become a big influencer like Tom, have millions of followers. Be medium. And if you're really shy, try to have a small following, try to have a 50,000 person Instagram account, figure it out how to create some wealth for yourself, and then do a joint venture with somebody who doesn't mind their face out there, and you split the money. That's how people should be making money now. I figured this out 10 years ago in that house. 2011, 2012, I was like, personal brands. And you know what's funny? I started with Millionaire Life Coach. I was still tricked by wave number 2. Trend number 2 is corporations will win. And so I bought Millionaire Life Coach. It cost me $3,000. And I launched it, and it just never got traction. And I remembered about a year later that I had bought TaiLopez.com for $7 in 2009. And I was like, what if I make it more personal? And I kid you not, in that house right there, I'll never forget, before you could go live, you had to use this corporate live software. There was no Instagram Live and all that. I went live in that house. 150 people were on, but true fans. And I sold a product, I don't remember what it was, and I made $100,000 in 30 minutes. Wow. And I remember thinking, okay, well, this works. And my costs were 0. And that's when I knew it, but I was still early. It's so easy now. It was hard then. So 3trends.com. I'll get the book. Can I plug something? 3trends.com.
There it is.
I'll take you to the book. I've laid out all my opinions. People are, oh, what should you do? Instagram, TikTok, post. Is podcast better? TikTok? I'll tell you my opinion of the brainwashing of TikTok, how you can use it to your advantage. And I got all that in there. It works. I've done, like you, I've done, way more than 100 million just from a personal brand. And a lot of people can be doing $1 million, can be doing 200 grand. The rise of the individual. That's trend number 3. And if you catch that, you'll always be happier, man. The worst one was the one that our ancestors had. Your dad was stuck in the rise of the corporation. Trend number 2. Thank God that trend's dying. And damn, trend number 1, governments. We'll talk about that another time.
All right,
My
dude,
friend.
first of all, it was awesome having you.
No,
Thank
thank
you so
you.
much for being here. Everybody, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. If you want to learn how waking up at 3:30 a.m. can completely change your life, be sure to click here. Check it out. Your life will change forever the moment that you decide to get up early and really attack your day. Go to bed at the same time every day.